Everyone, and welcome to the Milton School Committee meeting of October 20th, 2021. I hope that you're all well this evening and have been enjoying this incredible October weather that we've been having. Our first agenda item is to call the meeting to order and to review the agenda and to make any changes, additions, or subtractions to the agenda. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add, change? I'm going to add under policy subcommittee report on the policy subcommittee meeting of what was it, Monday or Tuesday, Dr. Carroll?
This past Monday. Yeah.
Okay. That would have been the 18th.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. 18, 2021. Anyone else? All right. Then I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda. Anyone?
So moved.
Okay. All right.
Second.
Second. Okay. This is a roll call vote. Member White?
Yes.
Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Member Ross-Lane?
Yes.
Dr. Craighead?
Yes.
Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
And Member Eberhardt? Yes. All right. Welcome. All right. With no further ado, oh, there's Director Prack-Martin. Hi. Welcome. With no further ado, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Jett for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Eberhardt. We have a slight switch, and I apologize, I didn't catch it in time. Under the report, we're going to move to item B. It's the harassment policy and reporting system. Here to present this evening will be Somali Prack-Martin. If Somali's out there, I don't see her on my screen, but I believe she's on there. So Somali, yes. I would turn it over to you. For those that don't know, Somali Prack-Martin is the Senior Director of Equity Education in the Milton Public Schools. Somali.
Thank you. So I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. I made a really nice presentation for everyone. And it's not letting me share my screen.
Superintendent Dexter, can you see if you can give her that permission? Usually if you allow multiple participants to share.
So do you know where I would do that?
So like go on the dots next to her name.
Yeah, it's not letting me. I have like a hand icon, but it's letting me mute her, which I'm not going to do. Oh, wait, hold on. I think he just might have fixed that for me. Okay, hold on. Allow to record now. So would I say allowed to multi-pin? Is that what I'm doing?
It is allow multiple multiple participants to present. Share screen, I apologize.
I do not see that.
Okay, so someone else might have to share their screen and then Director Prack-Martins can do the presentation.
Okay, so I will send the presentation over to you, Amy, if that is.
Got it, I'll share it.
Okay, thank you.
In just a second.
Thank you.
Right now.
And we had an updated one later this afternoon, Superintendent Chet.
Okay. I hope this is the last one, the updated one. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
And Somali, you just tell me when to click next.
Sure. Oh, go back to there you go. So the district currently has a bullying incident reporting protocol and process, and it's very robust. It's under the actual website that there is there. Now, under the bullying policy prevention and intervention plan, there are components that identify sexual misconduct, racism, hate, harassment, discrimination, gender threats, retaliation, and cyber bullying. All of those are incorporated. So with that being said, can you go to the next slide for me? Here are ways that you can report it. There are hard copies. The hard copies are located in the equity office, the front office, the nurse's office, and guidance. Or you can go online at that particular website, or you can go to your homeschool website, which will have the links. And right here, I create a really nice barcode for students. If those things are going to get posted in the school areas, they could just snap it with their pictures, with their phones, and then report away. So those are the options that we currently have right now in reporting the incident. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. here's some information on when you should report. As I'm going through the policy itself states very clearly on like when you should report and how you should report. What I think is missing was just some sort of visual component of this for those who may not read the 36-page policy on bullying, and trying to make the information much more easier and digestible. So I just kind of put this together and, when should you report? When you feel unsafe, witness to an incident, experiencing harmful behaviors, experiencing harmful words, unsure, need help with processing, and need support with the experience. So this is how the flow chart goes once the report is put in place. So incidents involving family and students, the reports can go to the teacher and coach if that's who they reported to the department heads, to the principal, and the equity office and central office. If you're a staff, the reports can go to the department heads, the principal, equity office, or central office. If you're a principal, the report goes to the equity office and the central office. And if you're a superintendent, the report goes to the school committee and or Title IX, which I did not add onto there, but I will, Title IX officer of the district.
Somali, can I just add one piece to that presentation?
Sure.
Under where it says department heads, it should say / athletic director as well. And
Yep.
to be clear, if the reporting system is against the superintendent, that's when it goes to the school committee. Obviously, if you're a teacher and I harass a teacher or something like that, the teacher's not going to come to me. They would go to the school committee. I just wanted to make that distinction.
This is what the process looks like. The incident report is done. Safety protocols are enacted. So I want to explain what safety protocols are. If I'm a victim and I'm reporting an incident, the accountable party, the adult, the school district, the whatever, needs to make sure that I am safe from the person who's harassing me or bullying me or making me feel harmed. Those protocols have to be put in place. Then outreach to the appropriate parties are involved, could be parents, coaches, or whatever, or whoever it is that's involved in the process. Investigation by a certified personnel respecting the rights of all parties. This part is important because, when you are investigating certain types of harassments and certain types of bullying, there needs to be some level of certification in being able to investigate it in a fair and equitable manner as you're, going through the process. Then the outcome and next steps are decided. And then the action, as well as the action, could include a safety plan, should always include a safety plan. But here I put the district aims to approach behaviors through a restorative lens. Our goal is to help learners better navigate their behaviors, cultivate respecting relationships, and restore the harm that has been inflicted so they can become productive for themselves and their communities. So past the safety plan needs to be a restorative plan. How do we restore to some level the safety of the individuals involved in the incident, and how do we learn from that and build their capacity to navigate such incidents? Because our role as educators, I think, is not to do things for people, but to support them in learning how to navigate these situations on their own, if and when the time comes. Thanks, James. So here are some considerations as I'm, looking through the policy. These are just some questions that I wonder. So the bullying prevention and intervention plan already has a component around identism. So identism doesn't exist as a word yet, but it's a word that that I use a lot. But it's about being hated or discriminated or acts of bullying against someone based on their identity. So whether that's race, whether that's a person who is differently abled, etc. How can we use the current bullying prevention and intervention plan to support our equity work around identityism and current district needs? Were those impacted by this policy at the table and equipped to engage in this work? Does the current plan address the current needs of the district? Has this data been tracked by the district to inform district needs? Does our form allow us to track such data? If not, how can we redesign the current plan and implementation to ensure all learners staff, families, students, and community partners have access and utilize the policy. Oh, I lost my presentation. Is it still there? I see you, James.
Yes, the presentation is still there.
The presentation is still there.
So why do I see you? Hold on.
I might have to change your screen view.
Maybe trade. Can everybody else see the presentation?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Hold on. Oh, there it is. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh,
So
sorry.
can you move to the next page?
All right.
Thank you. So here's our current form that the district uses. It's a replica of the DESI sample form. If you take a look at this form, it's pretty generalized. Who did it? When did it happen? Who was involved? And here are the things that happens during the investigation. And here is the conclusion of the investigation. You go to the next form for me, James. Now, this is the form that's used by Cambridge. And if you notice, it captures the same information, except there's a location in which the type of harassment is being recorded. Harassment of bullying and on the basis of sex. So our current form does not allow us to collect that type of data to identify whether these allegations are on the basis of whatever we're trying to gauge. But Cambridge does. So we're gonna move to the next phase, the next slide. So here's the new Google form. I believe Superintendent Spalding worked with a group of people on this process. And this is where she got to the process prior to exiting our district. So Milton Public Schools Bias Incident Sexual Misconduct Reporting Form is complete and has been shared for feedback with stakeholders. Feedback has been incorporated. Students' voice has been elevated through formal and informal forums, listening to their experiences with bias and their thoughts about action steps. It has components to capture identity demographics. So if you want to click on that for me, James, and we can just, I want to just show the form really quick. So here's the form. And if you click through the form, there is a section. Go ahead, James. Keep going. There you go. There's a section there that now includes that. So can you go to the next steps for me? Thank you, James. I just want to be clear that that form is not in use yet. It still needs to be vetted legally prior to us moving forward as a district, and in terms making sure that that we are setting a plan up, so we're setting people up for success in using this. So here are the next steps. Here are the short-term goals. Review the reporting system to ensure it aligns with state laws and regulations. Reestablish expectations of practices with the current reporting system. Initiate a district protocol to capture, monitor, and analyze such data. So yes, we're collecting this data, but what happens with it? And we're working with the data team to figure that part out. The other part that we need to figure out is the hierarchy component of confidentiality of who can access what forms when and who can see this data when. So that's the other piece. Build a district's capacity to fairly and consistently investigate bullying incidents around identity, bias, and harassment. Then you have the long-term goals. Re-engage the team with an inclusive and diversified lens to continue this work. Review the policy process and tools from an equity lens with a focus on the current needs of the district. Reconstruct the bullying prevention and implementation plan in alignment to state laws and the current needs of the district. Obtain student, families, and staff and community partners' input on the new plan. Submit plan for approval by June 2022. And build out an implementation plan with an identified K-12 curriculum for staff, families, and students so the plan can be implemented with fidelity by all constituents of the districts at all levels. And I think the next thing is questions.
Thank you, Director Prack Martins. Member White, do you want to start us off? I'll try to see your hands. You're in my.
Sure. I was reading the Globe this morning about an issue that happened in Wellesley with a student, and I'm just wondering, these forms and this policy, do we need to think about how we inform families and how we inform members of the community when these things happen, and given there are privacy issues and confidentiality issues, and do we have part of this policy related to how we involve or inform other members of the community? And what are people's rights to know, what's happened and how the district is dealing with it?
Well,
I apologize. Is you guys still seeing my screen? I can't get out of it.
Yeah, you just need to stop sharing.
Yeah, I know. I don't even have my bar. Oh, here it is. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
This is why I don't like doing this when it's not my.
Sorry, I couldn't share. I didn't have the rights. So I think our first priority needs to be the student safety and the confidentiality of the student, and making sure that the student does not get retaliated on, whether they are the person who is reporting the incident or the person who actually inflicted the harm, because they're children and we should do our job to protect them. So their identity is confidential. The other piece we need to consider is when the parents do call and try to figure out what is going on. There are certain pieces of information that we can share, which is the actions in which we're taking with their child. However, we are not, we will be violating legal confidentiality laws if we indicate what we're doing with the other child to that parent, because again, that's privileged information. James, I don't know if you want to answer more on this, but I feel like the other piece, as I'm reading the bullying intervention and prevention plan, is that there are components of it that needs to be reworked from an equity lens. There's aspects of it that, maybe is not implemented in the way that we want it to be implemented. And what does that look like in terms of implementation with fidelity? And there's the piece of really fully identifying the sexual misconduct and the racist or bias incidents really look like. They are defined in the bullying policy, but I don't think it's elevated enough for people to understand. In addition to that, we have a policy, okay? Some people know how to use it, okay? Some people have access to it, okay? But if I'm asking my students to use a form to tell me when they experience a microaggression, but I did not do the work with them to understand what a microaggression is, or what a racist comment is, or what hate language is, then the form is useless to these groups of students. And that is not access for all. So that's the other piece that needs to be considered with the legal component. Is like, are we legally putting these things out where everyone in our community has access to it, real, authentic access?
If I could just add one piece, the reason why it's like that is student discipline. Individual cases, a student, that's part of a student's record that is confidential to that student and the family. Also, a personnel, when you start getting involved in, adults, it becomes a personnel matter. So we might be able to give the incidents, we may not be able to give the full infractions or the consequences. I think Somali made reference to that. And to be clear, this is something that's in process, in being worked on, being looked at. In the discovery and looking at this, we had at the high school, there's a program called Administrators Plus that records some of these. At the elementary level, it was the email me forms or things like that. So now we're in the process of trying to streamline to make sure that there's a consistent method throughout the district with all administrators, with all support staff, that they know what this is. And this is the stuff that we will be working on as we continue to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Betty, you finished. Member White, you done with your question?
Yes.
Member Ross-Denny, sorry.
You're on mute.
Lizzie, Beverly, you're yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to share the current policy with us, and sharing the fact that we know that it's inconsistently being implemented, and that's the reality of systems. My concern is, in the meantime, what happens, one of my concerns is, in the meantime, what is going to happen to our students? As has been brought to the attention of some people, we've had several incidents very early in the school year, of race-based harassment. And I think, with the exception of one child who decided to take action into his own hands, the other two were not resolved with much satisfaction. And what concerns me is, we never seem to have a short-term plan that can make people feel comfortable that when some child is being harassed, that they'll be okay. I know I've shared with some of you that the general understanding amongst the students are, if I report an incident of racial harassment, actually any type of bullying or harassment, either it gets worse, because either the person who came after you finds out, or if you stand up for yourself, you could be engaging in a physical fight. So for kids of color, there is no recourse. You could probably apply that to just about any type of bullying. But it worries me that this is where we are. So I do have a direct question for Director Pack-Martins, in terms of, when you looked at best practices around these reporting systems, you found the form from Cambridge, which is very helpful to see in comparison. Are there 3 best practices around this work that you think Milton should absolutely implement as we develop our new plan?
So I will tell you that this was handed over to me 2 weeks ago, because this was the work of Dr. Spalding. And when I first came, I did not have access to what was going on with this group, but now I do. And it was handed to me 2 weeks ago. And within the 2 weeks, I did the research to fully understand where the district is at. So if you're asking me, are there 3 existing practices that exist somewhere else that could work for the district? Absolutely, absolutely. But the challenge in this is that we are a system that have our own culture, our own identity, our own issues, our own situations. We cannot take something that currently exists in another district and think that it's going to work here without the planning the plan and the plan of implementation and localizing these particular strategies, because we have to localize it. There are different factors that occur in this district compared to what is happening in other organizations or other districts that may impact the level of implementation and the speed of implementation of these particular strategies. Yes, there are plenty of strategies. One of those strategies is restorative practices. That's a huge piece. And I know the district has talked about multiple times implementing restorative practices, and we have leadership who has taken that training. We have to start somewhere, but restorative practices is not something where 5 people in an organization can do and it works. Restorative practices needs 100% of people in the district to implement for it to work, because it is a practice about community and building community. And without your community buying into it, you're going to have pockets of kids who feel safe and other pockets of kids who don't. So if you would like that to be on the next report of, here are the 3 practices or the major practices that we're going to implement as a district, I'll be happy to report that. But I don't want to sit here and report something that I haven't fully engaged in researching. And I want to make sure, even when I do find something, I need to understand it and also plan it within the context of Milton.
And what do you think is the biggest flaw in our current practice?
The practice in itself, the implementation, the building the human capacity to do this work. Because you can tell someone they're racist, and you can tell someone that they're doing all of these particular things in a wrong way. But until they're bought in and understand what aspect of their behavior is racist or what aspect of their behavior is harmful, then they're not going to change that behavior. And if we want to sit here and think that we can just give the teachers tools and our answers are going to be solved, we have need time for the teachers to learn the tools, implement the tools, coach them on how to use the tools correctly. Because I can give someone a hammer. If they've never used a hammer, they're not going to know if they're using it correctly or not. So those are the things that we need to talk about. And if we're talking about shifting a whole discipline model that the district has practiced for all of these years, the union is also something that we need to consider.
Well, thank you for your responses. The only point I'd like to leave you with is while we take the time to do all of this, there are kids who are suffering. And
I agree.
I don't want good to be the enemy of great in this, but I thank you for answering my questions.
I agree, and I'm going to follow up with that as there is a process. The process is being taken. The process is not great. It may not even be good right now, but there is a process. Kids are reporting it. We currently have 4 allegations that's happening in the district, so we know about what's going on. Again, if the people who are investigating these things are not prepared to investigate racist incidents or harmful incidents, they can do more harm than good. So there are kids suffering, and there are going to be more kids suffering if we don't start somewhere by making sure that the people who are handling the cases are equipped to handle the cases.
If I could just interject, because I wouldn't want to mislead anybody right now watching this. There is a system in place. There's an online anonymous bullying thing, reporting system on the front of the web page. It's been there for years. I also want to let the general public that is watching this, every school in the Milton Public Schools does an anti-bullying, anti-harassment presentation at the beginning part of the year. If you want to know when your school had or will be planning their presentation, I would encourage people to communicate that with their principal. As far as reporting, we are, and when I say we, MPS is only as good as the information is shared with us. We know that we're in a different era where a lot of stuff goes back and forth online, on individual social media, TikTok, Snapchat, whatever the case may be. If we don't know about it, and part of our presentation is talking about bystanders, when to speak up, when to share that information, have a conversation with parents. If parents don't report that to us, or students don't report that to us, it is very difficult. That's why one of the biggest things that we're talking about is building positive relationships where students feel comfortable and trust the adults that are in the building. And any of these incidents could be reported to a nurse, administrative assistant, custodian, teacher, administrator, principal, whatever the case may be. We want to make sure that every single student has at least one adult in the building that they feel that they could go to and trust. So for those who have any questions about that reporting system, it's on the front of the website. I would encourage you to do it anonymously. If you do it anonymously and don't want your child's name or your name shared, be as detailed as possible. If things are happening in the building, not in the classrooms, there are cameras in the building that we could go to, and then start our own investigation into following up. So I want to share that with the viewing public, because I want folks to know we are working on the consistency of this. But as you can imagine, you deal with things differently at an elementary level than you would at a middle school and high school level. So I just shared that. Sorry about that. I know Dr. Carroll has a hand up.
The link in the form is also on slide 2. The link to the webpage and the forms plus the phone thing is on slide 2.
Dr. Carroll?
Thank you. And thank you, Senior Director Prack-Martins, for bringing us this update. I guess I'll start with my second question because it sort of follows off of the sort of exchange just there. And I think it is just coming back to the student experience in trying to figure out what to do, where to go. And I hear what you're saying, Senior Director Prack-Martins, about the need to continue building capacity in those, across the district for everybody who would be in a position to receive a report, to make sure that they are able to kind of handle that as you were describing. In the meantime, though, kind of building off what Member Ross Denny was saying, I'm noting on, the slide where you have the flow of all the various people who could be receive the report. Would there be a way in the meantime to kind of help, funnel, for lack of a better word, like funnel reports to people who have been trained? Maybe a student could submit a report to their trusted adult. If that person has not necessarily been trained, is there a way to kind of get that in the hands of someone who has? I'm only like thinking out loud on this in that spirit of what Beverly was sharing and the urgency. Like, it's a balance, recognizing the need to take time for a comprehensive process and also needing to kind of continue implementing something now that does even more directly than our current, DESE form that you shared, address the concerns. So that was one thing. And I'll just ask my second question now. It was about the piece and with what you shared around the transition from Dr. Spalding to yourself and leading on this work. I'm curious to know more about the stakeholders who have been involved in the process thus far, because it does say, I'm trying to find where the slide indicates that on the new Google Form slide, that feedback has been incorporated, the form is complete, has been shared for feedback, which has been incorporated. Do you know whose feedback that was incorporated? Because then I also see later in the next steps slide, the intent to include further feedback from stakeholders. And so I'm just kind of trying to understand where we are in that process. And the last thing I'll say, and then, I'll stop, is just wondering about June, if we are going to, if your plan is to bring a full kind of plan proposal in June, then what would be the ways we could stay in touch about this going forward at intervals to make sure that, we don't wait until June to pose questions that we could have been perhaps sharing between now and then. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Absolutely. So those are three great questions. You may have to remind me because I'm going to start at question number 1, which is, yes, I will say that prior to me putting my hands on this, the reports did not go to the equity department because we never had an equity department. It's not in the policy. So what I'm doing is requesting that the report goes into the equity department so I can do and support the schools in that way. In addition to that, the other piece that we need to consider is again, confidentiality. Thank you, Dr. Craighead Elizabeth White for asking that question about confidentiality. I think a lot of that process will have to be answered with a lawyer in terms of who can have access to what when. Because a lot of times when there's a safety plan put in place, the principals will go and ask the adjustment counselor to step in to support it, or they will call James, or they will call Janet, or in the past, Assistant Superintendent Spalding, to help them guide them with how they handle the situation. And now, if the situation is not handled in a way where the students are not feeling safe, I wonder what the follow-up looks like after the plan is put in place, and whether that process and system is being followed or implemented consistently, right? Like, do you check with the students? What is the restorative plan, and what does that look like? So that's the answer to that. So right now, yes, we can funnel the stuff to those who are trained, but right now the only people who are restoratively trained are the assistant principal and the principal. We have a plan to phase out the training to build capacity on who gets certified to be restorative. The other training that James and I have been talking about is the training on investigating and being certified to investigate bias and sexual conduct incidents. That's those are two different skills, right? Because we, as much as we protect the victim, we also have to be cognizant of the rights of the person who's been accused, and what does that look like? Because something like that going on a child's record can be very damaging for the future, whether, especially when it was just alleged and not actual facts. So that's the other piece that we're putting into play, is identifying this, at first, the school principals to take this training and be certified on investigating these things. The other piece I think that you also asked about is the follow-up on where these reports go, again, because it's a legal document. We would have to check with the lawyers to figure out how the flow can work. And I'm just going to elevate the challenge of my position right now, because within the system, the position recognizes assistant superintendent and superintendent as the person of authority to be able to have access to 100% of the student files, the student cases, staff cases, etc. The system does not recognize that of my position in this current state. So if that is something that you want the Department of Equity to support and help, that may be something that needs to be thought about in terms of how this position is phrased or tailored or whatever, because we will run into issues with confidentiality around staff if that's not clear and cut out. And can you remind me what question number 2 was?
It was just about the stakeholders. Who has been in the conversation so far?
Okay, so the report that I reported on that slide was the report that Karen Spalding shared with us. Again, this process was handed to me 2 weeks ago. I have no idea who was on the team, how it was vetted. That was just told that that was done with the form, and there was a team working on it, and that Dr. Spalding said that. The reason why I said that there's another vetting process is that we need the time to iterate this policy to make sure that it is addressing the current needs, this intervention plan, that it is addressing the current needs of the district, especially around collecting data and identifying the needs at each school and what the supports look like. So once those things are put into play, we need to vet it with parents, with the staff, with students, with the school committee. And yes, we can definitely keep in touch because it is in fact a policy piece. So if the policy subcommittee wants to work hand in hand with this in this process with me, I'm more than happy to do that. And then third was?
Sorry, just the idea of sort of updates at intervals and the ability to continue this between now, over the course of this year, recognizing the urgency from students and families.
Yes.
Dr. Craighead, would you like to say something? Elaine, you're on mute. Unmute.
I put my hand down, but I forgot to unmute. There were 2 processes I needed to go through. I won't belabor the point too much that my colleagues have made before me, but I do believe that there could be some small shifts even. I've done some work around restorative justice in my own work, and I believe that there are ways in which we can make things better for the students in the next 8 months before we get a new plan in place. I hear about so-called microaggressions. I don't like the term because it makes it seem like it's little, and it's not to the people who are suffering with them. I hear about microaggressions on a regular basis happening, not usually in terms of race, but more around gender expression and sexual orientation. I think it's happening quite a lot. It seems to be part of the daily experience of a number of students in our schools. And I'm concerned about it. Like Member Ross Denny, I am concerned about the fact that when students report this, the person who committed the bullying act knows who it is who reported, regardless of whether it's anonymous. As Superintendent Jett pointed out, the form is anonymous and it can be submitted anonymously, but the one who receives the retaliation on the other end is the person who already was bullied in the first place. So we definitely have work to do. I just wanted to, and this really isn't, all of this isn't really directed at you, Director Prack-Martins, because I know you just got this 2 weeks ago, but it's just frustrating. Could you, for the viewing audience, for the listening audience, give us an example of restorative justice? If you could take the example that I just gave, like a microaggression around sexual orientation and calling someone a slur. So what would happen in a sort of typical or restorative practice situation?
So once the incident is reported, we can only act once the incident is reported or we witness it or see it. The student that is being harmed is the first person that we attend to if we're talking about restorative practices. We speak with the student. We identify the need of whether we need to contact parents, contact whoever to share that information to say, hey, this is what occurred with the student. We are processing with the student, and we need to determine what it is that we need to give the student for their safety, for them to feel safe. And if we need to remove the student from the situation, if it's a harassment or bullying to a point where it has to be some level of removal, whether that's the person being accused versus the victim, that's a whole nother conversation. Once that student is worked with and talked about, that student is part of the conversation on how the situation can be restored for them. My biggest question to a student who has been victimized is, hey, how can we make it better for you? How can we make the situation safer? What are you comfortable doing right now? Can you have a conversation with the person to confront? If you're talking about restorative practices, part of taking that power back is confronting the person who harmed you. And the work with this victim or quote unquote victim is to get to that place where they can navigate those types of conversations themselves. Now, there's work also with the person who was accused of the incident. You have to investigate. You have to talk all of those who are involved. And then the person who actually conducted the harm, the restorative work has to go with this person too, so they can understand the impact of their behaviors. Sometimes that comes with them and their parents together. Sometimes it's a conversation, a conferencing. We call it a restorative conferencing when it's that person, the parents, the counselors, the teachers, the administrators, as well as the victim and their parents and their supporting system. And we all conference together to determine what we need to do next for this person to learn from this mistake, and then this other person to feel safe. So that's the restorative conferencing component. So that's the restorative plan. In addition to that, we need to do work with the community because they just witnessed this. And there is trauma that occurred based on just witnessing something like this. And there's work around that as well. Another piece is I don't want us to think that this is always just student on student. Sometimes it's staff on student, sometimes it's staff on staff. The idea of this restorative process is to make sure that all learners, staff, teachers, and students are working together as a community. And the work has to start where that person is. Does that make sense? Like we're looking at everyone from a learner stance and knowing that, hey, you're part of our community. What can we do to support you in learning that this is harmful for this person and everyone else around you? That's the approach of restorative. Does that answer your question?
I know this has been a lengthy conversation. If I could just interject one time, because I think that we're really getting into the weeds. And in fairness to this whole process, I want to be clear. Last year, Karen Spalding, Dr. Spalding, Assistant Superintendent, was taken on this lead. She had mentioned it at one of the school committee meetings and mentioned it with Somali Prack-Martin present. Somali Prack-Martin was not part of her full team or the folks that she was working with at the time. In regards to Somali getting this was a discussion that came up about a month ago, not 2 weeks ago, a month ago, about having this reporting system. Unfortunately, within that time, the person who was working on it, Dr. Spalding, was the owner of that material at that time, and Dr. Spalding left the district on Friday, September 10th. Unfortunately, we were without an assistant superintendent of curriculum and personnel for about a week and a half to 2 weeks when Janet Sheehan took the role. And we were prioritizing how we could get up to speed, opening up the school, looking at data, doing some of the other work. So I want to be clear to the general public that there's so many competing priorities. Doesn't mean that we're not going to get to them. We have it. But if I challenge anyone to look in your student handbook that went home to you, if there's a reporting of harassment, you could go to your student handbook. It gives you that chain of command on who you can report to. It also tells you the chain of command if there's a school issue incident that you can report to. You have the online reporting system. There's the guidance counselor system. And as I said, if you go to the high school did their orientations on the first couple of days of school, freshmen and sophomores, juniors and seniors. I challenge anyone to talk to folks. This is all about how can we enhance a system that is already in place. And I think that is important for folks to know. I don't want people to think that we were aimlessly negotiating or dealing with student issues in the Milton Public Schools. That is not the case. As a former principal of both of middle school and high school, there is a hierarchy. Now we just have to make sure it's consistent or a consistent form that makes it easier for reporting. Finally, a lot of this information is recorded to some degree because it's uploaded in our SIMS data that goes to the state. That's how we were identified for our disproportionality in regards to school removals and discipline. And so I did want to share that to folks because I think where we're starting out in trying to make these improvements, I don't want anyone to be misled to think that there's no reporting system whatsoever. I hope that clarifies.
Thank you, Superintendent Jett. I'm going to let Member Rostini say one more thing, and then we're going to wrap up this conversation because Susan Maselli is waiting in the wings for her presentation as well. Member Rostini.
Yeah, so I just want to thank Superintendent Jett for making that clarification for the public. There are many things that the district is actively working on and many competing priorities. And last year when Dr. Spalding recommended this new reporting system, I think it was after reflecting on what was shared in the summer by families of color. And actually, as Dr. Craig had pointed out, applies based on gender, applies based on sexual orientation. There's many other ways in which the system we have isn't working for everyone. And when the request was made for the idea of coming up with how do we make this better, the idea was Milton isn't the first district in the United States to have issues of race and harassment, issues of harassment based on a bunch of isms. The concern is, in 30 days, I was hoping that we could find some information about how could we do it better. As Dr. Craig had said, in her current role, she has had some of these responsibilities. So it's a matter of when there's an opportunity to learn from other people, it's not to say that you're going to follow everything that they've said, but you can learn something. And I am appreciative that the district is taking seriously the updating of this policy to reflect our current times and also to make more students feel safe. I think the parents whose children have been victims in the last month and probably over the last school year probably don't feel completely supported, but it's not for a lack of action by Milton staff. It's from how does it turn out for that child? Does that child still feel safe at school? Do they still feel welcome at the school? There's been a lot of work behind the scenes that parents have had to engage in to protect their children, while the people who are the perpetrators are living their lives without any restorative justice practices. So I'd be happy to be part of the discussion as we go forward. And I would like to thank you all for putting all the thought and time into getting this to where it is and for all the opinions that have been shared tonight.
Thank you, Member Rostini. And thank you, Director Prack-Martins, for doing such a thorough presentation, for only having taken on this information 2 weeks ago. For just two little clarification things so people understand. Can someone or Superintendent Jett or Assistant Superintendent Sheehan explain Title IX and who is the Title IX person in the district?
Yes, the Title
I
IX
think,
office. Oh,
go ahead, Janet, yes.
go ahead, Janet.
Go ahead, James. No, go ahead, James. I'm not going to, no, go ahead.
Okay, one of you, it doesn't matter.
The Title IX officer is Janet Sheehan as the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and Personnel, and also the Title IX officer. I would allow, and this is for instances of harassment, sexism, or any type of those harassments that elevate to the level where a person is feeling discomfort, racism. She's the person that you, well, first, if it's against a teacher or an administrator, it goes to Janet Sheehan. If someone were to allege it happened to Janet Sheehan as the Title IX officer, obviously you don't go to the person in charge. It'll come to me, and that's where that hierarchy was.
Yeah.
But Janet Sheehan is the Title IX officer.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for the community that this is a policy, that mandated by the Commonwealth to have policies in place to prevent bullying and harassment in all forms.
And if you,
and I know that this is a very heavy topic for the community. It's very painful to hear what Member Rostany said, to hear what Dr. Craighead said, to know that children are experiencing these things, and to know that we are doing our best and working harder to make it better. I think the last thing I'd like to say is in all the conversations that we've been having around the ways that we're looking at the district this year in terms of equity, in terms of social emotional development, in terms of curriculum, we're trying to build capacity in students as well. So that when you start at the pre-K level and you work your way through, you are building capacity in the students to recognize the things that are kind to say or not kind to say, that are harmful, and how you can deal with those things as you move through your educational experience here in Milton. So when we talk about that, that's a really important piece to think about moving forward, that we are building capacity in our students to not commit acts that are harmful to others, and to recognize when they happen that you can restore things and that you can move forward in ways that are beneficial for both of you, painful for victims and sometimes for the perpetrators as well. For as Director Prack-Martin said, there's often trauma and incidents involved in them. So this is a very complicated, very human, very spiderwebby, messy life situation. And I really appreciate the effort you're all making. And I know that we can continue to do better for everyone involved. So thank you so much for all of that, and for your honesty, right? And for your willingness to work hard. It's hard to have these conversations, but they're so necessary to make things better and to make people feel safe. Absolutely. That is number one. Children who don't feel safe do not learn. You learn that in early childhood for sure, right? For sure. So I really applaud all of your efforts, every last single one of you, and the parents, and I know we will get there. And I know the school committee will be happy to play whatever role we can to make things better for everyone. So thank you, Director Prack-Martins, so much.
And thank you, Chair Aberhart. And just one final piece on that, and I will move on. If folks forget who the Title IX officer is, you could access that on your child's school website under their handbook. Any email that you get from me, and probably most folks in administration, there's a disclaimer at the end, at the bottom of your of the email that tells you who the Title IX officer is and how to go about that. And I would encourage people, don't wait for an incident, navigate the front page of the website so you know, and take a look at the reporting system so you familiarize yourself with it so you know where to go in the event that you have it. And as a last resort, always call a principal, guidance counselor, adjustment counselor, nurse, teacher. You can let anyone know, and they're obligated by law under 51A, under a mandatory reporter, to report that information to the administration. So I just wanted to share that with folks, and we will continue to work on it. At this time, if there's no more questions, I would like to call Susan Maselli, I believe, who has joined us on this call. Susan Maselli, she's going to do her presentation. Excuse me. Is Susan Maselli? I can't see on my screen.
I'm here, James.
Okay, she's going to talk a little bit about the disproportionality plan for the Milton Public Schools. So you could take it over, Susan. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Superintendent Jett, are you projecting or am I projecting?
Oh, gosh. Welcome. Can you share screen on your bottom, Susan, like on your screen? Can you see that you can share a screen or no?
I can. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to connect with folks. I wanted to give you an update. I know I spoke in March about the work, last March, with the work we were doing regarding the disproportionality. I wanted to give you an update, a little bit of data, a little bit more background, a little bit more on action steps, and respond to any questions that might come up. The first thing I just wanted to point out to families and school committee is that many districts are being faced with disproportionality work this year by the Department of Education. And the role of this work is to help make sure we're doing the best we can for our students who need special education. So the context of this is a bunch of educators working very hard on behalf of students who are faced with making difficult decisions in team meetings. And our goal is to support them in that work so they can make the best decisions for students on behalf of them. And that this process sometimes can be challenging. And when we integrate this work into some of the challenges Milton as a community is experiencing, we know that we need a systemic, holistic, student-centered approach. So my presentation is really focusing some of the things that I've been talking about with people, and I'm hoping that it's helpful to provide some context. So historically, the district was identified by the Department of Ed in 2017 and 2018 of being at risk for two disproportionalities in special education. The first one focused on a disproportional number of students who identify as Black or African American being labeled as having a communication disability. The second one looked at the same subgroup and a disproportional number of school removals due to discipline. So we really started back in a while ago with this work. I'm going to give you a little bit of the data, and then I'm going to talk to you about what we did back then and what we're doing now. So here gives you a context for some of the data. The valuable information in this chart to focus your attention on is the risk ratio. You can see in the determination of a communication disability over 4 years that our risk ratio, which was the likelihood that a student would be identified in the communication category versus the not likelihood. So you can see the subgroups. This is the data that the Department of Ed provides us based on what we report on student demographics. And in 2017-18, the risk ratio was 3.43, 3.75, 4.5 was a year that we really crossed that threshold. And that's when the risk for disproportionality became a calculated disproportionality. But I also want to draw your attention to the fact that for last year, we were able to drop that number. That is in part due to the work we've started in the last 2 years. So we are not there yet, but we are aware and we are working towards changing this trajectory for our students. Each subgroup is identified here. The first column for each year represents the total number of students in that subgroup. Then you see the number of students who had a special education program in that subgroup, and then you see the percentage. The Department of Ed is advising us to look carefully at the risk ratio, not at the percentage, because that information may not be as helpful as the ratio number. In the category of discipline, we are still in the at-risk ratio. We have not, thankfully, reached the category of being disproportional, but the Department of Ed is asking us to look at this data carefully. In 16-17, 5.9 was the risk ratio for a student who identifies as Black or African American being removed under school discipline. In 2017-18, we see that number decrease significantly. We see an increase in 18-19, and I'm waiting for last year's data to be finalized. They're a year behind in this work when it comes to discipline, so I'll be able to get you those numbers as soon as they're posted through the Department of Ed. So action steps to date. So again, these disproportionalities were first brought to our attention in 17-18. In the fall of 19 into the winter of 20, the town sent a team to a disproportionality summit at the Department of Ed. That team at that time was then Principal Jett, myself, Principal Elaine McNeil-Germay, and we went to a summit with the Department of Education to talk about where we were at, and we began to develop our initial action plan. The steps that we took in that initial action plan focused on looking at district PBIS, which you know was a strong initiative the district was partnering with the May Center on back in that time. We began to look at the root cause analysis for how this disproportionality may have come about. And we started to look at what district resources we currently had in place and what we needed to add to address this concern. In 1920, and in 2021. I was able to secure a couple of grants. They were referred to as the 258 grants. And those were competitive grants where I was looking specifically at two basic areas. The first thing was to begin the training for restorative justice for our middle and high school leadership was where we started. Then we began to provide mentors to help re-engage students who were reluctant to attend school. Those were students that may have been in one of our disproportionality groups or could be at risk to be identified in one of our groups. So we had teacher mentors who are working with families outside of school to help kids re-engage. And then we started training with our school psychologists, who are the staff who are part of the evaluation team, to look at identifying bias in our assessment practice and how we could reduce that bias so that when students were being evaluated for special ed consideration, we were taking into account that we didn't want to be finding them eligible with our biases intact. We wanted to be able to remove that barrier and make sure that we were finding them eligible with good practice. So a very tangible example of that is recognizing that our assessment tools need to be culturally diverse and sensitive, and making sure that we're using those tools when we're evaluating all children. During 2021, I engaged stakeholders across the district in a pretty comprehensive root cause analysis. I looked at 15 years of special education data across the district of the students that are part of these groups. We looked at 4 years of discipline. I looked across schools, I looked across subgroups, I looked across clusters of students from every conceivable angle. I spoke with stakeholders in every building. I shared the data. We talked about the data. We looked at specific students, and we began to develop a robust action plan that was supporting us this year and beyond. I would like to also share the Department of Ed has been partnering with me on this work. They have shared in giving us feedback on our action plan. They really wanted to make sure that we were identifying a mechanism for systemic and systematic, programmatic, and philosophical changes in our work, and make sure that we were setting the district up for long-term success regarding addressing these areas. So I wanted to give you a little bit of information about how we're funding this work. I've secured this year 4 federal entitlement grants. 2 of them were grants we typically use, and 2 were additional ARP grants. ARP stands for American Rescue Plan. And these grants are setting aside 15% of their total funds to help sponsor the work we're trying to do to address the disproportionalities in our action plans. Long-term, we will need to have a conversation about how we're going to support this work. Long-term, these are grants, so they have a limited time frame to them. We can anticipate, we have them approved this year, and we can anticipate that we will probably have these resources next year, but beyond that, we're going to need to have a conversation about how we want to support this work going forward. I wanted to give you a little bit of an overview on this year's action plan. Initially, the review of district practices and procedures regarding eligibility and discipline with a lens of equity and inclusion, and using the restorative justice mindset. So again, our evaluation teams are looking at anti-bias assessment tools and practices to make best decisions at team meetings. We have trained about half of the administrators. Our goal is to train everyone to tier 3 of restorative justice practice. And that will give them training in several skill sets that I can talk about later. The second thing we're doing is looking for how we track referrals of students that are accessing our student support team. So at every building, if a teacher is feeling concerned about a student's growth, they have an opportunity to network with colleagues and talk about new and creative ways to support kids. That process is robust, it's developing, it's been added to over the last couple of years, and we want teachers talking about kids who are struggling, because we want to make sure that teachers have the skills they need to teach kids, and we want to make sure that we're teaching the way kids learn. So the SST process happens at all of our buildings. Last year when I presented to you, I talked about the role of the inclusion specialists and how they were facilitating that process. This is the place where we start talking about kids and success. It's also the place where we want to focus on data. A lot of the work that I've done this year is really focused on looking at the data that's driving what's happening for kids. We want to continue that work as well. We need to also look at the instructional support for kids and the gaps in some of their learning. The root cause analysis shows us that some of our kids in this disproportionality have not had early childhood experiences as robust as other students. So this grant is allowing us to really look at providing some interventions in the classroom for kids. One of the benefits of this money is it's not just for students in special education, it's also for students in regular education, and it's designed to identify kids at risk early and provide interventions with the expectation that if they don't need to be referred for an evaluation, that doesn't have to happen. If they do need to be referred, they're absolutely going to be able to go through that process, but with a more equitable lens. We've also been able to use this grant money to secure 2 additional adjustment counselors for our therapeutic programs in our middle and high school. These counselors will partner with the existing staff in the buildings to continue to provide support to our kids. What we do know is that some of the students who are in our first disproportionality for communication are at risk for our second disproportionality for removal of under school discipline. We want to provide therapeutic supports to them, again, using that restorative justice lens to make sure that we're really addressing their needs in a timely and preventative manner. We're going to continue to collect data on all of this work. The Department of Ed requires rigorous data collection down to the minute of how these resources are helping kids. And they want us to use that data and reflect on our practice to support systems management and change, to support professional development for teachers, and to support accountability that what we're doing is really helping kids. So a little bit about the professional development that we've been doing. As you know, last year, all teachers completed Dr. Warm's cultural competency training. So we have that foundation to start this work. For this year, the grant money that I've spoken about is focusing on preschool and kindergarten teacher in-class coaching on some of these key concepts. So I'll go through some of the concepts we're going to be addressing during training. The first piece is referral and eligibility. When do I refer a child? How do I sort of parse out between a learning style and an impairment and a disability? How do I look at those pieces? The second piece is UDL, RTI, and MTSS. So those are the terms that describe teaching new ways and different ways for kids and making sure that we're responding to their learning style in the classroom. UDL means Universal Design for Learning. RTI is response to intervention. Is what we're doing working? Are we having data that shows growth? And MTSS is multi-tiered system of support. Are we teaching to all levels of students in our classroom based on all learning styles? Another training that we're talking about, and this is where Director Pratt-Markin is directly supporting my work on this side of the grant, is at looking at history of educational achievement gaps and helping teachers appreciate the historical considerations for some of the students affected by this group. Excuse me. We're also going to be doing some training for this group on learning style and thinking about a strength-based model. You've heard Superintendent Jett talk about strength-based teaching. This is really an opportunity to embrace that work within professional development for teachers. Early literacy and ELA, we really are going to help teachers identify some of these instructional gaps that they haven't had the time to address given the rigors of the curriculum, and really go back to what comes before early literacy and early phonology, skills that kids acquire in early childhood centers, early childhood experiences. And finally, teaching teachers more skills to add to their toolkit regarding how they use progress monitoring and data collection to drive planning for kids. Oh, wait, sorry, missed one. So next steps. So right now we're in the process of hiring. We just started preliminary interviews for our posting for a restorative justice coach. And next week we'll be doing preliminary interviews for early literacy coaches. Our adjustment counselor positions are posted and we started the interviews for those. We're going to continue the full implementation of our robust action plan, which includes this professional development. We need these people in place to provide some of that professional development, so that will all be coming in tandem. I want to share with the committee and with the community that the Department of Ed has invited Milton to attend a national conference on disproportionality. The conference will be held in November. I anticipate there'll be questions about parental and family involvement in this process, and this is a wonderful time for any family member who would like to be part of this conference to reach out to me. I'm also obviously going to be including staff and administration from the district, but I would welcome anyone who'd like to join us to participate in that. This was an invitation event, so I'm excited to be able to look at this work on a national level and network with other people who are facing similar concerns and try and benefit from each other's experience. We're going to continue our ongoing data analysis and really looking at student need. My style is to lead by example in my daily work. So for me, the impact of this is working with teachers and administrators on a regular basis in their buildings. And that is what we're going to do to really address this work, is kid by kid, talking about students, impacting change, and then using the data to drive how we support growth for all educators and students. That is what I wanted to share with you tonight. I don't know if I'm sure you have questions for me.
Oh, I'm sorry, Beverly, member Rostini. Sorry.
And so based on my Zoom, there's like a row of hands that are up. First, I just want to thank you, Sue, for taking the time to look at the data and to do the research and to get some professional development. It means so much because it lends so much more credibility to any proposal that you make. So thank you. And thank you that the development you're doing with the teachers is job embedded. It's not a pullout. I'm sure there's some PD that they're having, but the fact that they can get it on the fly in the classroom when they're struggling is such a thoughtful way to approach this work. So my one question is, you had mentioned that we were waiting for some data from the state in order to see whether or not we've made progress. It's kind of like the MCAS reveal that you wait for. Is there a way to create a system internally where we can track this so that you don't have to wait for DESE? Because if something's wrong, it is that lag time that, given how proactive and action-oriented you are, I'm sure you would have done something long before DESE could come out and say something to us.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Thank you. I'm waiting for them to give us that risk ratio final number for last year's data. One of the variables that's impacting me calculating that right now is the model of COVID and instruction and what that looked like for students. So it's not data that's as clean because what students were doing in terms of attendance was all over the place. Some of the students that that attended remotely or attended in person or had changing schedules. I just want to be really thoughtful about the context of that information. So while we do know for the communication disproportionality, we do have all of those numbers. I know the school removals that happened last year, and there were not a lot of them. However, because of the model, I'm waiting to see how the Department of Ed provides context to that data. Schools were not open. We were open. So for example, my students, my own personal children were in school every day last year, but some Milton students weren't in school every day and some were. So I am trying to get some information about them, about how they calculate the percentage of that data when student attendance was varied. And I just don't want to give misinformation or without a context of this takes into account that your school was half hybrid, half remote, or half in person, half remote, or this takes into context that this student was fully remote. I just am sensitive to that, Beverly, which is why I had not put my own data in on that column yet. That will be coming, but I want context because I think that's important. It was a weird year.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Carroll?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Maselli. I'm really want to say I'm impressed by the clarity and just how detailed and thorough your presentation is. And I look forward to keep continuing to dig through it. And I just want to name something that I think you're presenting to us, which is that we should be able to expect our data to start to look differently based on these action steps that you have put in place. So I thank you for detailing the changes that have happened over the past 2 years, really. We know, those of us who pay attention to education research, understand that we need to allow for changes to take hold to be able to see the outcomes shift. And anyway, I'm looking forward to what I hope and expect will be some different improvements in our data based on the steps that you've outlined. I just wanted to observe one other piece. I know you mentioned specifically around the history of educational achievement gaps in Milton Public Schools that Senior Director Pratt-Martins is able to support in that area of training. But I just wanted to say that I felt like, especially because we just had the opportunity to hear from her right before you around a different topic, but I saw what felt like a lot of opportunities to kind of crosswalk this work, specifically around restorative justice. And you were talking about all the administrators that are being trained in these practices under the grants that you have secured. And I know that we were just hearing when we were learning about the incidents of bias and bullying reporting, the need to kind of take time to ensure that that training was happening. So I just wanted to make sure that, you know, these dots are being connected, and that we can basically gain efficiencies from the trainings that are happening around these disproportionalities, and that those can benefit us in all these different areas that are related. So just thanks again. And I guess I don't have a specific question unless you wanted to respond to that, but looking forward to seeing this work go forward.
Yeah. I'd love to give you a little bit more information because it provides a great context. So the Restorative Justice PD, the first tier that most secondary administrators have taken now, is about the whole concept of circle training and restorative justice as a skill. The second one begins to address conflict and harm. Some of our administrators have taken that and some have still need to do that one. The third one is really about restorative justice and discipline. So many of them are starting to take that now. They started the first tier. So in response to Director Prack-Martin's vision, we share the collaboration of getting everyone, you know, to that proficiency point. The other areas of training that they look at after you get through those first three tiers is the racial equity comes in at the fourth level. Classroom pedagogy comes in at the fifth level. Looking at trauma-informed care in the classroom is sixth. And as you go through those steps, you develop that skill set in that administrator. So to her point, to my point, it's a trajectory of learning for people. We were able to start some of that work for some administrators. Some went further than others. We have a few new ones who haven't had a chance to start it. They can do that this year. So I think as she and I continue to collaborate on the work of her department and the work of my department and the crosswalk, this becomes more naturalized, but we need to get people an opportunity to do those first basic trainings before they get into the more subtle nuances of some of the work that she was speaking about. I hope that helps clarify.
Yes, thank you so much. And just one quick follow-up, which you might not be able to answer, and I think this is something we'll continue talking about, but it's also the wondering about the plan for rolling that training out to teachers as well. I mean, obviously the administrators are the first priority, but kind of what's the vision, as you were saying, or timeline for that?
So I did share with principals with this new grant money, the total resources will afford us an opportunity to begin to train folks in their building that they identify as those initial contacts that should have this. So for example, the adjustment counselors. So I do believe that we'll be starting additional support for key positions, key stakeholders as this year unfolds.
Member White.
Thank you for your presentation, Susan. Can you speak about how many positions the grant has funded for this year and hopefully for next, and what we're looking at as the grants go away and the town needs to pick up the expenses, what that price tag is going to look like and how many positions it's involved?
Sure. So presently the 4 grants are covering 6 additional positions to support this work. There's the early literacy and learning coach position. That actually is a full-time position. And then we have a very small part-time position from one of the early childhood side of that grant. Okay. We have the restorative justice coach, which is district-wide. So that makes 3. We have 2 adjustment counselors, which make 4 and 5. And the 6th one is actually, I should have said 5. I shouldn't have said 6. Sorry, it's 5. So those are the 5 that we're starting with.
And what will be the price tag of those 5 positions after the grant is over? Putting on my finance hat, I just kind of want to get an idea.
So they're Unit A positions. So it would be the Unit A line item that you typically use, you know, and then obviously some staff select benefits and some do not. So we're looking at, you know, 5, I would say it's 5 FTEs to do the total of the work. Now, what that looks like as we start this work, we might talk about the evolution of those positions, and that could impact that, but we're going to start with this place and go forward.
Okay, thank you.
Member Rosemary.
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo my colleagues in thanking you for your wonderful presentation and moving this work forward. I'm particularly excited and interested in the work that you're doing at the early childhood level with the preschool program and kindergarten program. And I'm wondering what the role of the early literacy coach will be in this. If you can talk about that a little bit.
That's a great question. So here's the thing. We want our teachers to feel supported and nurtured while they grow their skills. So for me, that means that I provide the support to you in your safe place where you teach, as opposed to pulling you out and bringing you to a situation where you do something and then you have to come back and generalize. So we're going to do 3 different things. The first piece is providing early literacy, pre-reading support, early phonological development, early vocabulary and language to our preschool and kindergartners who may not have had as a robust early childhood experience as other students. That will help them be more ready to learn what the classroom teachers are offering in terms of literacy and math instruction. So the literacy coach will have that role. The second piece will be providing support to the teacher in the classroom about ways to make their instruction more available to students that might learn in new and different ways, and help them identify materials that are going to be more culturally sensitive, more culturally aware. And the third piece is participating in engaging families. How do we help families feel comfortable talking about how we can help them? That piece we need to continue to talk about. So we're going to be looking at this person to be a network for families in the community. For example, an early childhood group for students that don't attend Milton Public Schools yet, where they can learn about some of these early phonology, like a drop-in kind of activity where you come on Tuesdays and you meet for an hour and you learn a rhyming skill and you get to play with peers and you get to start to see the school and connect with grown-ups. That kind of community outreach will be a piece of this work as well. This person will in tandem support the professional development that the rest of us are going to be providing, which is out of the classroom. We've identified those key concepts I talked to you about earlier. The grant is providing us with substitute money so that teachers will be able to leave their classrooms, participate in PD, and then bring the skills back to the classroom.
Wonderful. Just a follow up to that, if I may, I just wonder whether you think that our preschool and kindergarten classrooms are developmentally appropriate, because our hope is that our classrooms are ready for the students that come and that we're ready to meet them where they are. And you know, there's a dance there, but and obviously kids are going to come in with different backgrounds and different experiences, but are we prepared to meet kids where they are when they come in?
I think it's a great question. I think our teachers, just like our kids, are on a continuum of learning, and some exemplify exactly what we're looking for, and some are growing their skills, just like all teachers and all administrators. And I respect the fact that these teachers are trying to work across sometimes very diverse group of learners. And what we want to do is support them in their own growth. So do I think we're developmentally appropriate? Yeah, I think they're doing a really nice job. There's a Yabit, and you guys who know me know how I feel about Yabits. We are a district of rigorous and very high standards. And I feel the sensitivity that our teachers have to help students reach those standards. So I want to be thoughtful and balance all of the expectations we have of them as we say, let's look at our early childhood and preschool readiness, not preschool readiness, before school readiness, and really allow them to celebrate what they do well, but also give them sort of the permission to remember that some of our students are less school ready or may want different experiences to be more school ready. And I'm not even just talking about the students who might be part of this disproportionality. I'm talking about all of our students. Mm-hmm. This crosses every subgroup. This crosses our students with disabilities, our students who have English isn't their first language. We really want to let teachers develop that skill set. So I think it's an all-encompassing approach, Ada, is my feeling about it.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yes, thank you, Dr. Masali, for your wonderful presentation. Just a few thoughts. I'm thinking that as finance, we all know that the key player here is the teacher in the long-term success of students. And that the number one, except for parents who are the primary lifelong teachers of their children, it's the teacher. Not that anyone else doesn't matter, but it's the teacher. And I think thinking about how to roll out the training district-wide and funding that in the district where I worked, it was a conscious effort to put in subs in place, to have days throughout the year, to make a plan for that like over the course of a year or two, that requires a financial commitment in terms of funding for the subs, having the teacher out of the room, which I know isn't ideal, but if you want to build that capacity again, then you need to plan for that in a way that you can fund it. So in that way, coming to the school committee, in addition to the other costs, but saying, what would that cost to fund those types of initiatives, to roll it out in a more comprehensive way for as many teachers as we can across different grade levels and across different schools. Something to think about. And then the last thing I just was thinking, as you talked about early childhood, that, I had the opportunity to meet the Commissioner of Early Education and Care this week and chat a little bit about the relationship between DESE and EEC, and just thinking about, if there's universal pre-K, if money comes down from the government, it will funnel through them. What will that look like? What will curriculum look like? And how, as a public school, can we build capacity in local early childhood centers to support their growth and learning as teachers too? I know that that's not our fiscal responsibility, but thinking about the ethic, just the responsibility as a learning community, what are the ways that we can reach out, perhaps through the Coordinated Family Community Engagement Grant and Susan Dolan, through opportunities like that, to think about building capacity in other programs across the town of Milton. So I thank you for all your work. It's always amazing to hear from you.
Thank you all. I appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, guess we're back to you, Superintendent Jett.
Okay, and I'll be quick. The last thing I wanted to share, if I could share my screen for a quick second. I know this is something that people wanted to get an update on very quickly. It's an update on some of our numbers. Let me move this out of the way. Basically, it's the MPS, excuse me. A lot of conversation over the last few weeks is about the test and stay program and the vaccination rates of our students. Right now, 826 students are vaccinated at Milton High School, which is about 75% of the population. 468 students are vaccinated at Pierce Middle School, which is about 50% of the population. There's 928 total students currently at Pierce. As of this morning, 245 students at the Pierce Middle School are not age eligible for the vaccine. So even if every child who is age eligible at Pierce received the vaccine, we would still have difficulty reaching that 80% mark that the commissioner is talking about in terms of the first. However, I do want to say this: last week when I checked that number was 268. So between a week and a half or so ago and now, 23 students had a birthday where they turned 12. Obviously, there's a lot of press right now that was on the news. I have communicated with Manette Community Health Center. We have a parent in the community, Marianne Dakak, that works with them. There was a conversation about that there may be a public announcement possibly on November 1st. However, if you watch the news this evening, even if they make the decision to make the vaccine eligible for those who are ages 5 to 11, there is a two-pronged process that folks go through. One, it goes to CDC, then it goes to FDA or FDA, CDC. I apologize if I'm getting them mixed up, but those are the two agencies that it has to go through in order for it to get approved. And then when that is approved, I would encourage parents to start having that conversation with their pediatricians now about what is it that they're learning, what's coming down the medical pipe for them to make the most appropriate decision for their child and their family. So I just wanted to share that piece with folks. As of today, and since September 1st, we've had a total of 59 positive cases in the Milton Public Schools. 9 of them were staff and 50 of them were students. Total number of, I apologize. Total number of close contacts in the Milton Public Schools is 208. And the reason why I put this other piece on here, the state reporting started on Monday, September 13th, or I believe, it was Monday, September 13th. Now, we had cases prior to that, but we couldn't record those cases prior to that. In the first week of reporting, it went from Monday, November 13th to Wednesday, 5 o'clock September 13th to Wednesday, September 15th. There were some people that had some questions about, thought we were playing with the numbers. Nope, that's just the way that the state reports it. And it goes every week from Wednesday night, 5 o'clock after the reporting closed to the following Wednesday, 5 o'clock. So then the state reports their information out by communities on Thursday. Far as this test and stay program is concerned, test and stay symptomatic testing program started on Tuesday, October 12th. So far, the student participation, we had 13 students at Glover, 9 at Pierce, at Tucker, 18 at Pierce, 3 at Collycott. And out of those 3, 2 were symptomatic, 1 was a close contact, for a total of 43 altogether. We had 3 students that have been identified as positive through the test and stay program. 1 false positive was negated by a PCR test. The reason why I share this with you, and I'm gonna stop sharing this for a second, because that's very brief. I just wanted to give you a visual. It illustrates that within the Milton Public Schools and the school environment, there is a controlled environment that not too many of our close contacts are contracting the virus. Unfortunately, we had a small few, but it goes to show what we are doing in terms of our mitigating strategies within the Milton Public Schools are working. A lot of our contacts or positives are coming from outside. And that's why I share with parents, as the weather starts to get cooler, activities start to move indoors, we're asking parents to please be mindful of that, particularly those parents of students who are at the elementary level. And then with this test and stay, as you can see, now by doing the testing, all of those students who engaged in that and received the negative test were able to go back to class immediately. That test takes about 15, 20 minutes, depending on the results. And I will say it is a little challenging to try to do some of the testing for the younger cherubs at the elementary level. It is a little awkward, it's a little challenging. And that was one of the things that we tried to say to people, that we needed that support. Otherwise, because you have to be delicate, you have to be sensitive, and you have to take it in mind where the students are coming from and where they are developmentally. So that's it in a nutshell. But one exciting piece of news that I didn't report, it still needs to be signed. The Milton Public School Committee on August 25th, Wednesday, made a mandate to have require all Milton Public Schools faculty and staff be vaccinated. Now, just like with any other business or entity, there are exceptions, medical exceptions, and possibly religious exceptions. I want to report to you very enthusiastically, tentatively, there was an agreement made. Milton Public Schools will be moving forward with the mandate. One of the first districts in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, where faculty and staff and school committee came to an agreement on that. I commend the faculty and staff. I also commend the courage of the school committee to be at the forefront of that. And one of the things that I say to the general public in the Milton Public Schools, that is a testament to the teachers' commitment to try to make sure that we stay open, and to Susan Maselli's point, providing a rigorous and welcoming, encouraging, and inclusive environment in the Milton Public Schools. So we're happy about that. We know we may run into a few exemptions, but there are processes and protocols that are in place to support those who may have a medical exemption or some sort of exemption. So that's my quick update. I know that the other piece under my report was quite lengthy, so I would leave it up to you guys for questions, or we can move on to the next item.
Yes, Dr. Carroll, did you have a question?
Yes, sorry. Thanks, Superintendent Jett. Just a quick question regarding the vaccination for children under 12. Can we start, maybe you have already, but planning for putting the pieces in place to set up vaccine clinics at our 4 elementary schools when that becomes available, so that we can kind of move as quickly as possible to begin providing those for families and students that are ready to take it?
Yes, I'm sorry, maybe you missed. I was saying last night I was on the phone with Minute Community Health Center. Quite frankly, I thought the announcement was in school committee member Ada Rosemary was on that email. I thought that the vaccine was going to be available November 1st. That might be the announcement, and I say might be, But I think member Rosemary to tell you, I was communicating with Manette Community Health Center trying to set something up for November 2nd, which was the Professional Development Day. So we are committed to that. But I also think that you're going to find it's going to be widespread because the reports now are saying they're going to make it available with pediatricians. They're also going to try to make it available within schools. Now, the reality is they're working on all types of components, smaller needles, stickers, all types of things, because when you're injecting younger kids, it's a different element than you're injecting a high school student. So yes, we are already thinking about that, but if they make that announcement November 1st, it might take 2 to 3 weeks before that becomes available because of that process of FDA, then CDC approval.
Anyone else have any questions about the COVID update or district updates? Shouldn't say COVID update. Superintendent Jett, I just want to thank you and all the leadership team, the nursing staff, everyone for the efforts, the teachers, custodial staff, every single person, Superintendents Dexter and Sheehan and Lori Dunn and Charlene Ross, just everything that you're doing to keep school moving forward, to keep it safe, health and safety issues, to push forward initiatives to help people get vaccinated, to give them information, and we're back in school and children are safe and we're maintaining mitigation strategies and we're moving forward. And I knock wood that continues as we move into the fall, later fall, early winter season of colds and flus and stuff like that.
Thank you for that. And I just, again, ask or reiterate that families should be speaking to this pediatrician in trying to find ways to get vaccinated. As we talk about every 2 weeks, the district updates and all of the priorities, we have over 2,500 elementary students and still have middle school and high school students that need to be vaccinated. For the Milton Public Schools to take on a public health crisis, even though we're putting some of these things in place, I think that the lion's share of that work needs to be spread out and it shouldn't be the sole responsibility of the Milton Public Schools. So that is why I'm asking folks to check with their pediatrician, because I do believe a lot of that is, or at least the reports that we're getting, a lot of those vaccination things are going to be sent to pediatricians, which may spread it out and afford us the opportunity to do that. We do have very limited time. Even if we were to open it up on 2 Saturdays, we were able to get in 3 to 4 hours with Manette Community Health Center with high school students. We were able to get, or adults, we were able to get about 200 to 300 in about a 3 to 4 hour span. Remember, once the vaccine is injected, there's anywhere from a 15 to 20 minute period where they need to be monitored under EMTs. And so our partnership, I do want to publicly thank Fallon Ambulatory Services and Manette Community Health Center for all of their support with us. But again, spreading that out will be a huge help.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't thank the students for participating and really keeping each other safe, and for the parents and the community who have really been a partner this year in moving school forward. So thank you to everyone in the community for that. And thank you, Superintendent Jett, Director Prack-Martins, and Director Maselli for the updates, which were, were somewhat heavy and full of a lot of thought-provoking information, but good work happening in the district for students. The next part of our meeting is a citizen speak. I will remind everyone this is an opportunity for citizens to speak to address the committee. Everyone has about 3 minutes to speak. The whole length of citizen speak is 15 minutes. If you would like to participate in citizen speak, you can raise your hand and you will be moved up to speak. I ask that you state your name and your address, and that you do not directly mention anyone in the comments, but speak to issues that are of concern to you, and to keep your comments friendly. I would like to note that I know that the chat and the question and answer were left open this evening, so I'm sorry that I did not shut them. I apologize to the committee. I don't want the community to think that we're ignoring you, but school committee meetings are opportunities for the committee to address and speak to each other, since we do not have that opportunity outside of the meeting. So I will try to see if I can ask someone to note or capture anything that might have come through the question and answer or chat that we might be able to address at a later time. But I don't want the committee to think that we're not cognizant of your thoughts. It's just, this is not the opportunity for us to address them at this moment. Okay, so I think Superintendent Dexter is going to help with this part. If you'd like to participate in Citizen Speak, you can raise your hand and we will move you up to address the committee.
Okay, we have, and I apologize in advance if I don't pronounce this name right. Yawa Degbo.
Yes, thank you.
You may now, speak.
Yeah,
Welcome. Welcome.
you pronounce it very well, Yawa Digboy. That's correct. So I want to address the issue of disproportionality. And as I mentioned, my name is Yawa Digboy. I live on Brush Hill Road, and I'm the mother of 3 kids. The oldest child is in elementary school at Tucker in the Milton Public School. So when I listened to the report on the equity audit a couple of weeks ago, the root cause analysis that Suzanne Massily shared today, and the action plan that was put in place, I'm still struck by a couple of facts. And I just want to remind everybody that we're talking about, first, the over-representation of Black and Brown kids to special ed referral. Second, the over-representation of Black and Brown kids in discipline action. Third, the under-representation of Black and Brown kids in the French program, for example. And fourth, the under-representation of Black and Brown students in advanced program. So tonight we highlighted the data and we share an action plan. And while I'm very encouraged by the step that we took forward, what I would like us to focus on is the people. So I'm talking about like the school community, the student, the teachers, and the parents as well. So what I'm concerned about is the impact of all of that on the mind and bodies of the Black and Brown kids at the intersectionality of it all. What I'm concerned about as well is the message that we send to non-Black and Brown kids who we should not be fooled about that, witness the discrimination, they see the harm, they feel the injustice, but know or they believe that we, the community, won't do anything about it. So I want us to break the cycle, set up a new norm, whether it's through restorative justice or other process and training, and let our kids know that regardless of their races, that if we see something, we say something, and we as a community do our best to fix it. So again, I'm very encouraged by the report that Suzanne Massily shared, these action plans that was put in place, and like our presentation. But again, like one of the things that I want to leave us is we own our community, as Suzanne Massily said, to lead by example. And going forward, I would like to continue to see that, whether it's through this venue, like the school community, or elsewhere in town. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
If there's anybody that would like to speak at Citizen Speak, please raise your hand.
Superintendent Dexter, I always forget this part. I should have reminded people that we don't address, we don't respond, but that we will take their comments and respond at a later time to any questions or concerns or thoughts. I apologize for always forgetting that piece.
Okay. Regina C., you may now speak.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Regina Campbell Malone, and I live on Churro Lane. I'd like to add on to Yawa Degboy's comment on disproportionality. She eloquently highlighted not only the disproportionality in regards to discipline, special ed, and the composition of students in the French immersion program. I'd also like to add that there is, albeit not recognized by DESE, a disproportionality in regards to what children are at each of our 4 elementary schools. And I think that plays a role down the line when all those students who have been de facto segregated join together at Pierce, and each school has not been able to prepare all the students for meeting up with students that they haven't really interacted with as elementary students. So I just wanted to add that that one note that is not really a part of the DESE data, but I think could go a long way towards thank you, would go a long way towards moving things forward in terms of equity and inclusion and the proper treatment of one another. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regina and Yawa.
If there's anyone else that would like to speak at Citizen Speak, please raise your hand now. Would anyone else like to speak at Citizen Speak? Please raise your hand. Okay, Chair Eberhard, I don't see any other additional hands raised.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Dexter, and thank you to our community members who shared their thoughts this evening. Very helpful. All right, we are on to the chair's report, I think. Yes, we are. Here we go. All right, so we have a few things on our report. So just going to review quickly for the public. We have our goals, the superintendent's goals, an appointment of MASC delegate, the resolutions, and a discussion on the subcommittees. So we will try to get through these things efficiently and but comprehensively at the same time and respectfully of our fellow community members. I want to thank everyone who emailed me with thoughts and comments about thoughts and comments about the goals. I had some conversations with people myself about them. So I really appreciate all the efforts that you made. So we'll start with our goals. Would you like me to put the Google Doc on the screen? Would you like that? You can say yes or no, maybe so. Yes, okay, I'm gonna do that.
You're on mute.
Sorry, my screen is giving me a hard time pulling up the goals. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, there we go. All right, there we go. All right. Can you all hear me? Am I on mute still? All right, so are there any goals in particular that any of you would like to address before we put a motion on the table to vote on the goals? Raise your hand if so, or shout out because I can't see you all at the same time. I see
This
member
is
White.
Beverly, and
Oh,
Betty
Beverly,
also
there you
has
are.
her
Beverly
hand
and
raised.
then Betty. Go ahead.
I've had conversations with several people offline about the unfinished learning goal.
Yes.
And I'd like to thank Superintendent Jett for establishing goals that are related to instruction. There are 2 goals that were on the last version of the school committee's goals, which we thought might be better positioned under the superintendent's goals. And it has to relate to the formative assessments that the district purchased last year for the elementary and K-8 to really help us understand how students, what students were learning without having to wait for the summative assessments of the MCAS. And we would like to add those to your goals, not for any punitive function, but because we thought that it made less sense under the schools committee goals and more sense under yours. And it had more to do with making sure that we actually purchase those resources along with the professional development necessary to implement them with fidelity. So that would be the only request I would have. Like, I'm uncomfortable approving our goals if we know that these 2 points aren't captured somewhere.
Thank you, Member Rostand. Do you want me to find the version of the goals that had those on them just to pull them up?
I think it'd be helpful because I wouldn't assume that Superintendent Jett had those on top
Sure,
of
hold
mind
on.
because I
I
know this
will-
is a new conversation for him.
I will find them. Just give me
But
a
I would
second.
like to get his thoughts on it. It's not, as I said, there's no number attached to it. We just need better information, and it was something that was brought up by a member of the leadership team.
Sure. Okay, hold on. I'm coming back. All right. So these are the goals that Member Rostand is addressing, C and D. We took them out of our goals because they really aren't school committee goals. They're not goals that we can effectively address in our role as a legislative body. But they are directly related to the presentations that we just received and to the information that we just had conversations about in our superintendent's report.
Actually, you know what? I just realized that, nope, they're there. I take that back. She's right. It's C and D. So
Yep.
we have on our list purchasing the assessments
Correct.
and
Right.
the professional development. So I take that back. There were two goals around grade level.
No, Beverly, this is the other draft. This is the,
Yeah, sorry.
so
That's
this
right.
is the
And
one, so they're not on our draft anymore.
that's right. But there is the assumption that there's no way going into this fall would any reasonable person think that the district had an action plan for unfinished learning. But I think given a 2-year time horizon and the leadership team that you have A, inherited, and B, some may have been hired, I think it's reasonable to say that in 2 years, with the tools, that we should be able to get there. Did you get a chance to read those,
Sorry,
Superintendent?
I'll put him back up. I apologize. I can't see Superintendent Chet, so I didn't even know that he had his hand raised. Sorry.
Well, he might be saying he did.
Okay.
No,
Did you
if
get
you
to-
want to leave them up and I can address it. So
Okay, there we
whatever
go.
you guys want me to put in my goals, as long as, and I would emphasize without being punitive. So by June 2000, you said C and D, right? By June
Mhm, yep.
2023, MPS K through 8 will demonstrate grade level proficiency in ELA and math for their current grade level. I have no problem with that. I think that is a very optimistic and very lofty goal. I go back to what Sue Maselli said. The students come to our buildings with varieties of different learning experience. There's some things that play in socioeconomics and supervision, prior learning experience. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. And also, I think about just this year, we have more than 205 students that moved in the district. Some students of color, some with disabilities, some ELL. I just want to make sure when we're saying every student reaches that proficiency grade level, we have those exceptions that are built into that, because those are some of the factors that play into that. So I have no problems if that's what, I have my reservation about that, but if that's what you guys want, I have no problem working to that because that is our goal. But I also know that there's extenuating circumstances, and this is not the deficit-based model. I'm going with the strength-based, but I just want there to be some understanding that there are various different elements that we can't control, and we all know
And
that.
that's very fair. And I purposely wrote it in terms of the realities of education. I've never worked with a district that said 100% of the students were proficient every year. There's always, kids learn at different rates. And to your point, there are the non-academic factors that impact a student's capacity to learn. With that said, I did put the caveat that it's pre-pandemic. So if this was 2 years ago and, you know, in grade 4, 60% of students were proficient in ELA, then that would be the marker. If anything, I would love the leadership team to recommend which school year that would use as a benchmark. It wouldn't be 2012, but it might be 2018 or 2017, but just being realistic. And if there's ever a point where there's some extenuating circumstance, I would say just bring it to our attention. When I had my personal goals that were blown out of the water for COVID, but I told my supervisor, so she knew long before the deadline for my goal that there was an extenuating circumstance. And as long as there's open lines of communication, I would hope that I know that myself, but I would also hope that my colleagues on the school committee would give you that same level of, what's the word, grace? If we can't meet it for some circumstance that you've articulated to the school committee. Does that sound reasonable?
That sounds reasonable. And the reason why I bring it up, I think about this year's third graders. They're about to take the MCAS for the first time. They didn't have a full second grade experience, and they ended their first grade experience out of school. And if folks remember, 3 weeks of that end of the year, there was, from DESE guidance, no new learning, try to do reinforcement. So I wouldn't call it learning loss, because loss is associated with something totally damaged. I'm calling it unfinished learning. So to your point, if that's the goal that you guys want to put on mine, I would be happy to accept that with that caveat. So not a problem.
Okay, great. Thank you, Superintendent Chet. I think, I think we all felt that representing this part of the district's data and understanding the need to keep it at the center of our work was so important, but there wasn't any real way for us as a school committee to make that part of our make it part of our goals, because it wasn't something that we could address to ourselves.
So Chair Elbahad, if you could go to the second one, I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Okay.
It's better on that because there was a D by 2003.
Yeah, I can cut and paste it somewhere. Yeah.
Okay, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. It's very similar.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So this here stands at the final draft that was compiled from all the different emails and thoughts that people shared with me. So I hope you had a chance to look it over, and we kept the assessments because those are things that we can look at. One way that we know that we can get at unfinished learning and measuring student growth is to think about our new curriculum and instruction advisory committee. And I think after tonight's presentation and all the conversations that were had around the need for ideas around curriculum, around supports and structures, that we need to find some way for the school committee to support these conversations and to be differently informed than we currently are. The personalized learning goal we also felt was very important, because this is the way that the district is hoping to move to personalized learning for students. And we had these conversations with Mr. Fish and his team when they came and talked about the changes they made to the math curriculum and the way they're supporting students learning in different ways. We kept discipline at the center of our goals, because as we just had from our presentations and from our citizen speak commenters, this is a really important thing for us to be addressing, along with the issues that the district faces in special education. We kept the curriculum adoption goals in here. I recognize that this is going to cost money, and how we identify and how we pay for it will be a conversation that we will continue to have. But we need a social studies curriculum. 2018 was when the new standards were adopted. It's 2021. And we need to look at our math curriculum. So I recognize that the budget process will be complicated and will involve many conversations, but it's necessary for us to keep this at the center of our work as well. Our family and community engagement goal is ongoing, even though we haven't even passed our goals yet. And I thank all of you for participating in this process. I think it's going to be a very successful part of our work this year. And then the last part in the document was on social emotional learning. I took out the specifics related to the screener that the district piloted last year and simply put in the fact that we need to identify the cost of implementing a screener, budget for that implementation, and then to look at what was identified as a need and to address them at some point in the next year. So comments, questions, thoughts? Remember, I can't always see you, so you can just talk if you like. No?
Margaret?
Yes. Hi, Ada, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay, Member Rosemary, sorry.
Thanks. Sorry, it was so hard to see and share your screen at the same time. Couple things. I wanted to just go back to the conversation about unfinished learning goal for James.
Yes.
I guess my feeling is that if James wants to consider adding an unfinished learning goal to his set of goals, for him to consider the draft goals that we had, and to decide what he thinks is an appropriate goal for this year. Remember, this is an annual goal for this year. We're still figuring out what exactly the unfinished learning is, and as we're assessing kids in real time and figuring out our plans for that. That's my comment on that. And in James's goals and Superintendent Jett's goals, he does have a couple of areas where he addresses the proficiency gap and the numbers of students meeting and exceeding expectations on MCAS, raising by 3%. So he's addressing those to some extent now, and I think it's really the unfinished learning piece that we might want to just weave in there. The second thing I just wanted to talk about was the personalized learning goal, which was I reached out to AJ Melanson, who is along with Kat DeRoche, co-chairing a group that is working on personalized learning for in relation to the strategic plan, and they advised me to bring forward this as a goal for this year about adopting a common data platform for all grade levels. And we have a data platform of Otis from the district that we've had for a few years now, but the implementation of that has been somewhat sporadic. And their belief is that if we can move that forward, either Otis or some other data platform, and again, that will be up to James and his team to determine, if we're going to stay with that and what that will be, but that would be a really good goal, that really having the data about our students is the very important first step that staff need to be able to begin to personalize learning for students.
Thank you, Member Rosmarin. Superintendent Jett?
Yes, to be clear, I am very fine with the conditions of adding the 2 school committee goals to my goals, because those are not for this year, those are for 2023. So I just want to be clear, I am fine with that, with the caveats that I guess what was making me nervous is I never want to put, they talk about SMART goals, you want something to be attainable. I think that's something to strive for, but I also know that there's sometimes there's different variables that play into that may not let you. So Member Ross Denny clearly articulated, as long as we're giving you updates along the way, that is perfectly fine. I am completely fine with that. The second piece is about the personalized learning, just so you know, AJ Melanson, Kat DeRoche, myself, we met with Dr. Paul Revel, former Secretary of State, today. This morning, also works at Harvard, talking about this personalized learning and what's important to put in place. And what he says is the structure for capacity and really forging relationships for our faculty and staff to really take the time to get to know students. So building structures. That's why you have the connection time / flex time at the middle school, the advisory here. At the elementary school, I'm not saying easy, it's different because the elementary teacher might have just those 24 or 22 students, whereas a middle school, high school teacher could have anywhere from 100 to 135 or 40 students in the number of periods that they teach. So a lot of this work, I just want to, again, assure you as a committee and assure the public that we are moving forward and looking at these things. And what personalized learning is not a curriculum. It was emphasized today, it is a norm, it is a culture, it's the environment. So, and we'll talk about that as we start to move forward through the process. But thank you. I'm all set with those goals.
Okay,
I have no problem with them.
Dr. Carroll.
Thanks. Thank you, Superintendent Jett, for taking on those unfinished learning goals. And the only other quick thing, I'm sorry I didn't catch it before.
Tell me.
There's a typo in the section that I drafted under community engagement. And I just want to correct that before
Where
we
is
might
it?
vote on these. It's actually, so Milton Youth Advocates for Change. That's very important to get that name of that
Okay.
group
Oh, here,
right.
Milton Youth Advocates for, where are they? On the encourage youth participation?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
So Milton, MHS Student Government, Milton Youth Advocates for Change. So, we have begun to engage with both of those groups and looking forward to hopefully some really fruitful work together this year. But can we please just correct that in the
Yeah,
final
yes,
version?
I can correct
Thanks.
that, absolutely.
Sorry for that.
No, I didn't
mistake.
know there was the name, so I'm sorry about that too. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, anyone else have anything to say, share, comment? No? All right, I'm going to make a motion to accept the 2021-2022 school committee goals. I need a second.
Second.
Second, all right, this will be a roll call vote. Member Rosmarin?
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Carroll,
Yes.
Member White,
Yes.
Member Ross Denny,
Yes.
Dr. Craighead,
Stay.
abstain, and Member Eberhart, yes. So you can help me with that. It was 501, is that right? No, 501. Okay, I want to thank you all. This was a very thoughtful process, and it wasn't easy because we sort of did things a little bit backwards this year. But I'm just thankful to all of you for your commitment to this work. Our two presentations tonight and our citizen speak tonight, and I'm sure others have left comments and thoughts, really speaks to the urgency of this work, because we're talking about people and young children who need our help, and need our support. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the changes that will come along. All right, so that's the first thing done. Then we have Superintendent Jett's goals. Do you want me to pull them up as well on the magic screen, as I refer to it, which I'm not very good at. So I spend a lot of time in.
You just put yourself on mute.
My husband wishes he had that magic button. All right, there we go. Okay, now you can see them all. Yes, thumbs up. Okay. So Superintendent Jett gave us a summary of what has been happening over the course of the last couple of weeks. We've only been in school, I believe it's the 32nd day of school today. Superintendent Jett and I were talking about that today. 32 days, that's it, but 32 full days. These were the focus this year. And then he had several different goals. He had professional goals around communication with families, continued communication, faculty and staff, and then a district goal. And again, this one had to do with the disproportionality in discipline for students and restorative justice. This one had to do with the disproportionality with referring to communication disorders and SIMS data and how we might address that. And these were the things that Sue Maselli spoke of when she gave her presentation this evening. These are the interventions that the district is working on implementing. And Superintendent Jett, if you want to say anything, pop in. I'm just sharing because it's under my report here. Here, our superintendent addressed some of the proficiency gaps under student achievement that we'd like to address over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, right? So you're looking not for next year necessarily, but 23, 24, because it's going to take some time to make up. Some direct goals addressing equity, and particularly around anti-bias training and different leadership initiatives that he's taking. Sorry, that's my phone. Sorry, hold on, guys. That's Timothy. That's Timothy's ring. What do you think of it?
Sounds like Timothy.
All right. And then we talked about social emotional learning, which, you know, we talked about tonight a lot about the fact that these initiatives build capacity in students. So these kinds of initiatives around social emotional learning, curriculum, and things like that are ways to build capacity for students to address social interaction, social awareness, peer relationships, and problem solving. So these were his goals as he presented them to us 2 weeks ago or last week. Would anyone like to have any questions? And we're going to add the 2 unfinished learning goals to these goals. Does anyone have any questions, comments, thoughts for Superintendent Jett? Yes, Member Ross Denny.
I want to thank Superintendent Jett for incorporating some of the feedback that came from the school committee and adopting 2 goals on the fly tonight. Thank you very much. My only parting thought would be, I encourage you to plot out the staff capacity necessary to do the goals. I have seen over my career, sometimes a small group of people getting the bulk of the responsibility for executing these tasks, or in this case, leading these tasks. So I just ask that you be thoughtful about making sure that the work is distributed across your team, so no one person or small group of people bear the brunt of executing this plan. And if there's any way that the school committee can help in terms of supplementing resources, whether it's our personal time or getting volunteers or just trying to identify resources to make sure that you have what you need to implement this plan, please let us know, because we want you to be successful. This is really good work, and I appreciate you writing essentially SMART goals. So thank you.
Yes, Superintendent.
And if I could, so I appreciate your comments, and that was something that came up in our strategic plan meeting yesterday. When you look across the board with the number of different committees, you got some of the same people that are on some of these same committees. And even though one committee might meet one night, there's multiple people meeting over the course of those. For example, data. Data is part of teaching and learning. Data is part of social emotional learning. Data is part of the special ed initiatives that we're talking about. Data is part of the unfinished learning. And so you have someone like Avivu in all of those categories. Same thing with special ed, same thing with the math coordinators and curriculum. So I'm glad you made that statement. And that is something I'm really going to ask, and I appreciate the offer, and I will be planning and talking about that and coming forward with a potential proposal, because it is, and I think the term that was used yesterday morning was the mental energy to continue to do the work it was supposed to be doing during the school day with the students, which this is all part of that. I want to make it very clear. But to your point, how do we spread that burden or that challenge or that work across multiple people? And so we're committed to the task. We have some outstanding leaders in there. One thing I will also add on this, there was a recommendation about a social emotional goal in terms of setting a timeline for this year and identifying specific interventions there. Obviously, I don't have that goal written, but I could definitely put something in place. But I will, with your permission, add something to that effect, because we do have on November 2nd, Jenny Belleville, who got a grant from BID Milton in conjunction with Karen Cahill, the principal at the high school, identifying four faculty and staff members from each school, which is about 24 people, that are going to be doing some of this work, spreading the wealth with teachers who are in the trenches or faculty and staff in the trenches, in identifying root causes to some of the challenges that our students may be facing, but also some research-based interventions to support them with that. And then my final statement, folks talked about the IntelliSpark in the SEL survey. I know last year we had some challenges around survey. I would take this opportunity to say this publicly, and there will be a letter going home soon. The survey that we're sending home is really to assess where all of our students are. This is not something that's meant to cause stress. It doesn't have anything about sexuality or anything like that. It's really a survey to talk about students' social, emotional, and behavioral health. We have seen a spike in the need. It's not just in Milton. You could watch any newscast, you see behaviors are percolating all over the Commonwealth. We need to do our due diligence. Someone said earlier, and I think it may have been Sue Maselli, if you're not healthy and you're not well, it's very difficult for you to achieve at a high level. So we're charged with that task of supporting our students in a multiple different ways. So I would ask people, even though it would come with our policy, it would come with an opt-out, I'm pleading, begging, and asking for families to allow students to participate, because the more people we have, the more information we get, which will lead to better resources, targeted resources to support our students. So I just wanted to share that. Sorry about that, Chair Eberhard.
No, I think it's really important. And I think we might want to use the word screener as opposed to survey, even though they're not really actually the same thing.
Thank you very much. Yes,
right? I mean, I do the same thing at work. So that's why I did the same thing the other day at work when I was talking about a screener instead of a survey. But I do think that, and some background information for parents about that would be helpful, so they understand what it is. And in some of the social emotional learning screening tools, they're actually parent surveys or parent things you can do. You can give parents as well to sort of be a part of that conversation for their child. So I always think educating the community and the parents in particular about the tools that we use and how we use them and how important they are, it really just sort of alleviates some of the worry. That's all. So, okay, great. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute so I can see you all again. Sorry. Does anyone have any other questions or thoughts about the goals for Superintendent Jett? Anyone? No? Okay, so I'll have a motion on the table to accept Superintendent Jett's 2021-2022 goals with the addition of the 2 unfinished learning goals that we discussed this evening.
And the SEL goal that he just mentioned.
And the SEL goal, I apologize. Thank you. SEL.
I'll move those goals.
I second them.
Okay, all right, then this will be a roll call vote. Someday we won't do roll call votes, we'll all be in person again. Dr. Elaine Craighead.
Yes.
Member Ada Rosemarin.
Yes.
Dr. Carroll.
Yes.
Member Ross Denny.
Yes.
Member White.
Yes.
And Member Eberhard, yes. 6-0. Wonderful. Thank you so much, all of you, and especially you, Superintendent Jett, for working collaboratively with us on this very important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, onward to the MASC delegate vote. So Member Ross Denny, did you figure out if you could go to the MASC conference?
You know what's funny? I don't think we actually finalized the dates, so I didn't look. I think we stopped the conversation, so I just stopped thinking about it. The dates, I'm so sorry.
Can someone remind me the dates? I think it's the 6th and 7th. Am I right, Member Dr. Craighead?
I believe it's maybe the 4th, 5th, and 6th.
Okay, so and Member Rosemarin is looking it up.
It's during the week.
Yeah.
It's partially during the week.
Right.
Like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, Thursday and Friday are the days that I can go, and those are the 4th and 5th. So I think it starts on Wednesday and
Okay.
continues to Saturday. So
Yes.
it may be.
Member Rosemarin, does it indicate on that schedule that you have the day that they actually vote on the resolutions?
No, I'm not looking at their
That's
schedule.
always
I'm
on
looking at
Friday.
mine.
Oh, I
Sorry.
apologize. Dr. Craighead, sorry.
That's always on Friday the 5th.
Oh, it's always
Always
on
on the
Friday.
Friday of the conference, and this year it's the 5th.
Dr. Craighead is our reigning expert on the MSC conference because she would go every year. And thank you for doing that. So Member Rosemarin, are you planning to go?
If it's the MASC, I believe it's November 3rd through the 6th.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um,
Let's look it up.
Yeah, I'm going on the 4th and the 5th.
Okay. So we need to appoint someone as a delegate to vote at the meeting. Would you be willing to do that, Member Rosemarin?
Sure.
Oh, okay. So I have a motion on the table then to appoint Member Rosemarin as the delegate for the MASC vote, I guess, or conference. Do I have a second for that?
Enthusiastically second that.
Okay, so Dr. Craighead enthusiastically seconds that. We'll have to do, okay, committee, all right, this will be a roll call vote. Okay, yes, Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Okay, Member Ross Denny?
Yes.
Member White?
Yes.
Dr. Craighead?
Yes.
Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
And Member Eberhard, yes. Okay, great. So 6-0. Thank you so much, Ada, for taking that on. Really appreciate it. The next thing is to vote on the actual resolutions. And I know that Member Rosemarin had an idea. Let's see if she would like to share it with you and see what you think.
Yes, yes. After going through the resolutions, I forget how many of them there were. Like
I'm gonna get them. Hold on.
9 or so. What I was thinking that we might be able to do is, in the interest of time, consider doing a consent resolution so that a consent agenda, I guess, sort of like we do at town meeting, where if we can all vote on the resolutions as a block, if we're all in agreement, that we could just do it that way. And if we're not in agreement on everything, then we can discuss those that we are not in agreement about. So.
Okay, Dr. Craighead, because I can see you. And now I can't.
I think that's a great idea. I also think that the wording of the motion to support the resolutions or whatever we decide needs to have some caveat in there that accounts for the fact that almost all of these resolutions will be slightly reworked after discussions and so forth. So that last time when I voted on these, I was voting on versions that weren't the exact versions that the school committee had supported.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can very quickly. All right. So does anyone else have a comment before we move forward?
I just think if it doesn't substantially change the resolution, I think it's fine to give Ada as our voting member the flexibility of going forward and just voting as we ask her to.
Okay. Dr. Carroll and Member Rusteni, since this is your first time on this lovely venture here in MASC resolutions, do you have any questions about the resolutions or the thought of doing a consent agenda and pulling any out for further discussion? Nope. Okay. You okay? Did anyone have one of these resolutions that they wanted to pull out for further discussion, or you're okay with making a consent agenda for all 9 resolutions? Member Rosemarin?
Yeah, I would recommend including all 9 resolutions in the consent agenda.
Okay. So I may need some help from Dr. Craighead, the wordsmith here on the motion. So we are making a motion to approve or to vote in the affirmative for the 9 resolutions of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees Board of Directors to be voted on at the Massachusetts Association School Committee meeting on Friday, November 5th.
I'll second.
Oh, I forgot the important piece, with the caveat that there may be some slight change to the wording as currently written. Does that work, Dr. Craighead?
I think so. Sometimes the changes aren't slight, but there may be some changes as long as the spirit of the resolution remains.
Okay. Okay.
And
right.
can I just ask also, Elaine, you've got experience with this. It's my understanding that this is the delegate assembly.
Yes.
Yes.
Where this is taking a vote, right?
Okay.
Right.
Right.
So only, yes, only delegates are allowed into this meeting, and you'll just be representing Milton, and there'll be one from each district there.
Right.
Okay. So then the motion on the table is for our appointed or our voted delegate, Member Ada Rosemarin, to vote in the affirmative for resolutions 1 through 9 at the Massachusetts Association of School Committees annual meeting on November 5th, with the caveat that there may be some slight change in wording. All right, now do I have a second? I think Member White said yes. Okay. All right, so this will be a roll call vote. Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
Dr. Craighead?
Yes.
Member White?
Yes.
Member Rosteni?
Yes.
And Member Eberhardt, yes. I think I got everyone. So that's 6-0 on the resolutions. The resolutions are available on they were sent out as part of the package tonight. They're available. I'll make sure they're in the blog and are available on the website for anyone in the community that wants to look at them and consider what they're saying. They're actually pretty good resolutions in terms of like electric vehicles and additional recess and supporting health and clinical services at schools and fully funding certain things, the IDEA Act, alternatives to MCAS, some really good resolutions that were thought about at that by the MASC. All right, wonderful. All right, the last thing on our under the chair's report is to vote for the formation of our new school committee advisory committee, which is the curriculum and let me just find it. Sorry, committee. I just have to find it. Sorry, guys. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen again. So I did some rewording of the committee. Member Ross Denny had been kind enough to put together a description of the committee. And I went through some towns that have curriculum and instruction advisory committees, towns like Brookline, towns like Belmont, towns like Chelsea, towns like Framingham, or cities and towns that have these committees that work with their administration on curriculum and instruction, and many towns call them teaching and learning. And so I thought that this wording, which is borrowed from the Framingham School Committee, captures pretty well the goal and the hope of the committee, which is to really drive the work of the school committee in our decisions around funding and policy, and to help the district in that way around the ideas of curriculum and instruction. So the idea would be that the committee would work with the Assistant Superintendent of Curriculum and other Milton Public School administrators such as Susan Maselli, Director Prack Martins, and curriculum coordinators to focus on student outcomes, particularly on accountability and achievement. And some of the things that committees look at when they address these issues are course availability and placement, standardized testing, attendance, conduct and discipline, graduation and post-secondary success. One of the reasons I really wanted to move this advisory committee forward is because we spent a great deal of time in the last few school committee meetings talking about things that are related to teaching and learning, like the opportunity to dual enroll at college and opportunities to have personalized learning, and then opportunities around, the curriculums that would be needed about anti-bias and all that stuff. So I think this is an opportunity for the school committee to have more conversations with the administration and bring ideas to the full school committee, as opposed to all of us just having big conversations and not really getting anywhere at a school committee meeting. So I welcome comments, ideas, suggestions on this description of this new advisory committee. Nobody? Anybody? Okay. If there are no comments, I'm going to make a motion to approve the creation of this new curriculum and instruction advisory committee.
I'll second.
Okay, Superintendent Jett has a comment.
Sorry, is this something that's being reported within this advisory committee, or is this something that's being reported publicly at a school committee meeting?
No, so there'll just be conversations at, the advisory committee around things that you might want to put in data reports or find out about, and then they would bring recommendations to the full school committee, much like you do in policy, much like you do in finance, much like you do in that. It's really a way to really help the school committee be more informed about the decisions they need to make around policy and finance issues moving forward, right? And to do the things that we say we want to do, which is to advance achievement for all children, right? So anyway, thank you, Superintendent Jett. So did I have a second on that? I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Carroll. Okay, so does anyone have any questions before I ask for a vote? Nobody has any questions? Yes, Member Rosemary. I'm here. I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's not so much a question. I support the creation of this committee, but I'll tell you what it made me think of is that the types of data that we're talking about here are things that we would hope would appear on like a data dashboard for the district, so that we all have access to that information. And I think that's the thing I was thinking about is like, well, gee, I'd really like to know all that too, but I think we all would. And that, if, and I know that Vivu has been trying to put that together for some time, and this may be helpful in helping to move that initiative forward.
Yeah,
That-
I agree. I agree. And that's the goal. The goal is to do that and to streamline processes for everyone, for better outcomes for students. So, all right. So this will be a roll call vote. Sorry, member Rosemary.
Yes.
Okay, Dr. Carroll.
Yes.
Member Ross Denny.
Yes.
Member White. Sorry,
Yes.
and member Dr. Craighead.
Yes.
And member Eberhardt, yes, 6-0. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit punchy in my tiredness here, guys. And so I know that Dr. Carroll and member Ross Denny expressed interest in being on this committee. Is there any other school committee member at this moment that would like to be part of this committee? We could have up to 3. We can't have any more than that. You want to think about it and get back to me?
Mhm.
Okay, so at this point, I'm just going to say that members Ross Denny and Dr. Carroll will be members, and we may add additional members at the next or subsequent meeting. All right, I want to thank you all. That was a lot of work, and I appreciate all of your efforts, and bravo to everyone for their hard work. All right, now you, Dr. Craighead, are up, the key, the power machine of the school.
Oh my God, I'm so tired.
I know, I'm so sorry. I promised you, and I broke my promise.
Still awake. Okay. So I'm going to make this quick. For the FY23 budget, which is item A on the list, the Finance Subcommittee has met with almost all of the stakeholders in the schools to present their, I won't say asks, but needs for their schools or divisions. We've met with each school principal on their needs. We've met that's for operating. We've met with facilities and technology for the capital request, although that's still somewhat in flux. We still have yet to meet with special education and some other divisions, but we will be doing that in the next couple of weeks. I will say that in my opinion, the needs of the district are profound from what we're seeing from the asks, especially in the areas of learning loss, or I forget how Superintendent Jett put it. Sounded better.
Unfinished learning.
Pardon me?
Unfinished learning.
Unfinished learning, okay, unfinished learning and social emotional needs. We're seeing a lot of needs around that, the district. So the process is that we do still need to hear from those various departments. Those entities will prioritize their top needs. And in many cases, I know it's going to be incredibly difficult because everything that we've seen so far is a true need, and in some cases, well, they're all deep needs. Then the leadership team with Superintendent Jett will meet, decide on priorities for the district. They will present that to finance, and then finance will present to the school committee as a whole what the proposed budget request will be, and then the school committee will vote on that before we hand it over to the warrant committee. So that's where we are. Next on the agenda is the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. And that's a funding request that we've made. Well, we have funding in the town, and the schools have made a request to the town. And I'm going to let Superintendent Jett say a few words about that. And then I believe Assistant Superintendent Dexter is going to show a spreadsheet of what our ask is. But James, if you'd like to say something.
Yes, potentially we were trying to look at these additional sources of funds to try to see if we could take the burden off the town in the immediate future, knowing that we're going to need some of these positions. And we put in an ask. We may not get everything that we're asking, but we're hoping that we get as much as we can, from everything from support for behavioral health, 504 coordinator, to math interventionist, to reading interventionist. I want folks to understand last year, this academic year was only 170 days. And with the hybrid model all the way up until April 5th for elementary and April 12th for middle and high, students were going to school every other day. And quite frankly, they would do a half a day and then go home to log on and do remote. Some students driving that, some students didn't. So some of the asks that we're asking for, we're also talking about rooftop units under the ARPA funds that may be a cost that we might be able to do under this ARPA funding that's coming into the town. Those are, if folks realize the schools are about 15, 16, 17 years old, after a while, the wear and tear, especially the last couple of years, where one of our mitigating strategies where we had to leave rooftops units running 24 hours to enhance or increase the air exchanges and things like that. And there's so much pressure on them. Bill Ritchie had mentioned to our group that we had to do some of those once in a blue moon. Now we're doing them more frequently in terms of filters and repairing the generator. So, and then we're also asking for potential supports to help with the expansion of classroom spaces. And we have that list that that has been submitted to a town. And I want to be clear, nothing has been approved at this point, but we're looking to ask for these necessary requests. I don't know if Amy's there. I don't have the list in front of me.
Do you want me to share it? I can pull it up.
Sure.
All right.
Sorry about that.
No. Hold on. Can I ask a question about the list before I pull it up? Did you all vote in finance about like prioritizing the list? Do you understand what I'm saying, Elaine? Sorry.
If it's the list that you have, the priority.
Yeah, I'm going to share it right now. Hold on.
Okay.
I think there it is. There we go. This list here.
Yes, and if you look over to the column second from the
right. I see it now. I didn't see that. Yes,
yeah, it was prioritized.
Yep.
And obviously that would shift, but these are some of the positions, and I'm sorry, this feels like an eye exam for me, even though it's there, I cannot really see it. I don't know if you guys can. But yes.
I don't know how to make it any bigger.
No, that's perfect. That's perfectly fine.
View options from the top.
There you go. That's a little bit better. Thank you. So when you look over under the priority, under the top, second from the right, yes, that will prioritize the list. And one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to get it out in advance to let the town side know some of the things that we will be asking for. So as you can see, we're prioritizing the pre-K through 12 behavioral health. Number 2, we have the elementary reading specialist. That's a no-brainer. We want to try to, as best we can, make sure every student is reading that grade level by grade 3. So that's very important. Number 3 is the elementary math interventionist. And I know there's some questions before about math coach versus math interventionist. To clarify that, the math coach works directly with faculty and staff, the educators, with small amount of interaction with students. Under these circumstances, this math interventionist will work directly with the students. I think that's important to point out. The nurse, it has been stated over and over again. You could go all the way back to our presentations with the Warren Committee last December 2020. We talked about the need for the nurses. That was already an ask. That very last column would tell you it was asked for the FY22 budget, but it was a request, but it was not funded. So thank you. I'm actually pointing with my cursor, and I was wondering why I wasn't there. I forgot you were sharing it. So I guess I'm with Dr. Craighead. I'm exhausted right now.
Yeah,
but
me too.
And then you can see where it was a new ask. So I apologize under this format for the viewing public. This is something that is definitely in a memo form that has been submitted. But again, nothing has been vetted or nothing has been decided on the town side. I just want to put that disclaimer out there.
Thank you. I think it's a very informative chart. It has a lot of really good information in it, and and it shows where we've asked before and it was unfunded. And at the bottom, it indicates the ones that we had last year that remained unfunded. So I thank you all for your hard work. I mean, it's really very thoughtful work, and really summarizes the needs that we have right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I need to thank Amy Dexter.
So,
Okay, vendor warrants, Dr. Cricket, or?
no, we need to also, it says here, vote. So we've already submitted that to the select board as an indicator of what, we're looking for, but certainly I think we should take a vote as a school committee to agree to forward that to the select board as is. Assistant Superintendent Dexter has her hand up.
Yes, go ahead.
So I just want to clarify that we sent it to Town Administrator Michael Dennehy and Finance Director Karen Praval, as was directed by the Select Board last week at the Joint Finance Committee meeting. And then they were going to go through it first to see what was of these requests, if they were eligible or not under ARPA. So then the next step would be, but I think this vote could be to submit the request to both of the, to the town administrator and the select board, just to make sure it's covered.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to submit the ARPA request as presented to the Strong Town Administrator and to the Milton Select Board.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Dr. Cricket, I would just like to point out that whatever funds get available or anything, the amount comes to the school committee, but the finance subcommittee and the superintendents may reconsider what actually gets funded based on what the need is at that moment. The priorities are there, but I would like to point out that those responsibilities remain with you and then the full school committee. This is just the ask with a prioritized list, but in the end, the decision is made by the district.
As long as it's eligible. So
correct, right? That would be good to know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'll do a roll call. Is that what I have to do, Margaret?
Yeah,
okay.
have to. Yeah.
Okay. So Member White.
Yes.
I was getting ready to call everybody doctor. Everybody's doctor for a night. Member Rosemarin.
Yes.
Member Ross Denny.
Yes.
Dr. Carroll.
Yes.
Chair Eberhard.
Yes.
And me, yes.
All right, thank you.
And finally, we have approval of the vendor warrants. I'm going to do them together. There's two. I'd like to make a motion to approve vendor warrant number 16, payable on October 14th, 2021 in the amount of $253,166.31, and vendor warrant number 17, payable on October 21st, 2021 in the amount of $299,362.44.
I'll second.
Okay. Member White?
Yes.
Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
Member Ross Denny?
Yes.
Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Chair Eberhard?
Yes.
And I'm a yes too.
Great.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right. Dr. Carroll, you are up. Policy.
Thank you. I'll try to keep this as brief. It shouldn't be very long. You did add Chair Eberhard to just provide an update on the last policy subcommittee meeting, which took place this past Monday, the 18th of October. We reviewed three important policies at that meeton. The first was our district survey policy. We actually voted that out of subcommittee, some revisions to that policy but we weren't in time to get it on the agenda for tonight's meeting, given the 48-hour turnaround for posting the meetings. So for that reason, we aren't discussing it here tonight, but we will be looking at that together at our next full school committee meeting in 2 weeks. I'll just sort of share at this point in time that given the timeliness of that policy and our need to communicate to the community about it, I'll just put out there that I hope we could be prepared, depending on the discussion, to expedite a vote on a first reading of that policy revision next time. So we can discuss that when we're here next. We also revisited the residency policy, which we had looked at together and revised in August by adding a couple of exceptions to our residency policy. And at that point in time, we had said we would revisit the possibility of additional exemptions. And we discussed that as a subcommittee, and just the update is we decided not to pursue further revisions to the residency policy at this point in time. So we could always revisit it again in the future, but for now we are going to stick with the exemptions that we voted on to approve in August. Finally, we did begin discussing our professional hiring policy as a subcommittee, and we'll be continuing those discussions at the subcommittee level, but hope to bring that some ideas for revisions to that policy forward to this full school committee. My hope would be soon, within maybe next month or whenever we're ready as a subcommittee to do that. So those are the updates, and thank you for the opportunity to share those. I know it's challenging when we have a Monday subcommittee meeting right before the Wednesday full school committee meeting. So the item for us to consider here tonight under policy to discuss and vote on is the second reading of the anti-racism resolution, which we discussed last time. But Superintendent Jett, I see your hand raised, so I'll let you speak before we move on to that.
All right, just a quick thing. Maybe for the next one, maybe we get an update, or the next one or the one after the school committee, maybe the mask policy that we stated to the community. Maybe if you said that already, I apologize. Yeah. I'm a little.
No, thank you for raising that. So that is sort of a forward-looking update actually from our subcommittee. We do have our next subcommittee meeting will be November 1st. And that will be our opportunity to consider the mask policy. We had in August, when we first passed the current policy, we said that we would be revisiting that bi-monthly, and that brings us to November 1st. So we'll be looking at that. I also understand that DESE plans to give new guidance next week on their recommendations, and we'll stay on top of the data you shared, Superintendent Jett, which is obviously also important around our vaccination rates at schools. So yeah, that will be a conversation that we can also kind of report back on at the next school committee meeting as well on November 3rd. So thanks, Superintendent Jett, for helping me remember to mention that. Any other questions, or I don't think we're discussing any of those items. That was really just an update. And that brings us, I think, to the anti-racism resolution. And I remember that last time we seemed sort of on the same page about the revisions that had been proposed and voted out of subcommittee. I'll put a motion, I guess, to approve the anti-racism resolution as revised. I don't know if people feel we want to put that up on the screen again, look at it, or if anyone has any comments at this time.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah,
Thank you. Okay, so then we can do, does anyone want to discuss? Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote for this. Member Ross Denny?
Yes.
Member Rosmarin?
Yes.
Member, White?
Yes.
Dr. Craighead?
Yes.
Chair Eberhardt?
Yes.
And yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all the hard work. Policy is also the engine of the school committee. Finance and policy running the school committee. So, all right. Member Rosemary, you're up for a strategic planning advisory committee report, if you have one. Or if you're like done.
I'll give you what I got and as quickly as I can.
Okay.
The Strategic Planning Advisory Committee met yesterday morning.
Yep.
For the first time in 5 months. We meet quarterly. So this is the time of year that we usually have our first meeting, but a lot has changed, and we started out with a presentation by my co-chair, Steve Paxia, talking about why it's a time for us to rethink our strategic plan. And you know, the disruption from the pandemic, of course, the increased urgency for equity and equitable learning environments for all students and families, and with having the results of our equity audit in hand now, that all of those elements, and then with a new superintendent and central office leadership team in the past year, has brought us to a point to really relook at our strategic plan. Steve took us through, and I will share this. He did a PowerPoint presentation that I'll share with you all. But he talked about the different kinds of planning that school districts do, or any organizations do, being important for us to keep in mind. That there's strategic planning, which is goals that are meant to be transformative and require focused, well-articulated action plans to be accomplished. There's operational plans, which are a set of activities that are more on a 1 to 3 year time frame to enable the achievement of the strategic goals. And then annual plans, which are sets of goals established to address those short-term issues on an annual basis. And I think as we've seen going through the process of forming our school committee goals this year and the superintendent's goals this year, it was challenging because we didn't have the strategic plan set before we started embarking on this process. So in some ways, it was a backwards experience this year. And I think where we've come out is great in terms of our annual goals and Superintendent Jett's annual goals. But the Strategic Planning Committee discussed all of these, and then also talked about the former strategic plan that was, as we all know, it was long. It was quite detailed, that in a lot of ways it was like a merging of an operational plan and a strategic plan, because it had so many of the specifics in there that did make it so long. So that the goal moving forward is to maintain just a focus on the goals and related objectives, but the operational plans will have more of the details that will be followed going forward. And also the talk about the task forces that we've had in place for each of the goals that have been in place for a number of years under the former strategic plan, but there was, as Superintendent Jett mentioned before, people who were on strategic planning who were talking about work that was kind of being done in silos, and that there were individuals who were on each of those task forces and needing to run around to all these different meetings that was maybe not the most efficient way of getting the work done. So we discussed what some possibilities would be for our strategic goals moving forward, but didn't finalize those in any way. But what we did was we created a subgroup that will work together between now and our January meeting to develop a draft of what those, say hopefully three, possibly 4 strategic goals for the district will be. And that group will seek input and develop a draft that will then be brought back to the strategic planning committee, and then I'll bring it to the school committee to review and move forward. So that's basically, it's a work in progress. Any questions?
We just thank you. It's we thank you and Steve Paxia and Dr. Kevin Donahue before you and former member Roy Walker for all the work you've done to bring us to this point. And we look forward to seeing what happens with Superintendent Jett and in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
Really appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
All right. We don't have minutes. I apologize for not being aware that they were not attached. So the minutes from our October 10th meeting were not, that none of us could seem to find them. So we are not going to approve minutes. I looked again and again, but I couldn't find them. I don't really have any old business. I don't think anyone else does. Our next meeting agenda item, our next meeting will be on November 3rd. We will have the Cunningham School Site Council coming to that meeting. I have policy and finance updates on that meeting. I don't know, are there any other subcommittees or advisory committees that will be reporting out, Member White?
We have health and wellness next week, so I can report out for that. But there's no other member on the school committee on health and wellness this year, so we're looking for another person to join, if anybody would like to.
All right, will you send me the information about when the meeting is?
It's Friday, the 29th.
Okay, Superintendent Jett?
Yes, I apologize. I didn't do this under district update, but
No.
in our efforts to try to bring folks together, I should say, first of all, thank you to all of the parents and guardians who are helping out with the homecoming. We have well over 300 students at the high school, juniors and seniors, who will be participating in an outside event in the homecoming in the courtyard. So it is outside, but it's definitely protected. And also the senior class who was not able to do a lot of fundraising last year during the activities, they have a car wash that will be taking place this Saturday outside of the front of the Cunningham Polyclot bus lane. So hopefully folks will stop by and support them. So sorry I didn't do that on the update. But
No, thank you for updating us. That's wonderful. And if anything comes up between now and before we make the agenda, which will be sometime next week, please just let me know. Dr. Carroll?
Sorry, I had to. So it will be in the blog tomorrow, but.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I wrote it down. I totally forgot. Go ahead. Yes.
Well, just to remind people, it was sort of a save the date last week, and then there will be more information tomorrow, but we are having the community forums next Thursday, the 28th, to process and receive feedback on the findings of the quality review survey, quality review report, full report by Cambridge Education. And people can find more information about that in the superintendent's blog tomorrow, including links to attend at 7:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. Hopefully one of those times might work for whomever is interested to come share questions or feedback with us.
Thank you so much. I had written that down and then I forgot. And then also I had hoped to have the foundation come, but we had so much on the agenda. But the Monster Dash is Sunday, October 31st to raise money, Sam Chikello, in memory of Sam Chikello, for science education in the Milton Public Schools. So if you would like to have fun and go for a run or go for a walk and wear a fun costume, it's always a great event held up there by Cunningham Field. And you can go online to register if you'd like to enter the race, the Monster Dash race. And I'm sure there'll be upcoming announcements from them as well about the t-shirt contest and things like that. All right, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn to executive session, not to return to open session, in preparation for negotiations with union and non-union personnel to conduct collective bargaining agreements, or that's it, to approve minutes. This is I need a second.
Second.
Okay, I need a roll call vote. Member Rosemarin?
Yes.
Member Rostini?
Yes.
Member White?
Yes.
Dr. Carroll?
Yes.
Dr. Craighead? Member Ebhart, yes. I want to thank everyone for a very productive meeting this evening and wish you all a peaceful week. And I'll see you next time. Thanks to the community as well. Have a great week.